who need a sleep aid. So we try and do that as a live broadcast.
But that doesn't count those watching after the fact.
I've fallen asleep to many of them. They're really great.
Oh, it's on now.
Some I'm actually in.
All right, we are on. We're filming. Welcome to the Centerville City Council of February 5th, 2019. It's a special night tonight. We have many friends and families of the swearing in of 2 new police officers, which we're excited about, which is, as I was telling many of you, one of the things that I look forward to as these type of events. So thank you for everybody that's joined us. So we can conduct business at this meeting, we need to start by making sure we have a quorum present of our city council. So we'll start down on the end with Councilwoman Ivy.
Ivy present.
Meekum present.
McEwen present.
Ian's present.
So 4 of 5 are present. Councilwoman Fillmore is not here. My understanding was she should be coming, but we do have a quorum to conduct business. So to start, I have been assigned the prayer thought tonight, and I have a little thought and then a prayer. But you know, Thomas Jefferson was a famous statesman, and he was educated about a lot of things. And one of his quotes was, "Determined never to be idle. No person will have occasion to complain of the want of time who never loses any. It is wonderful how much may be done if we are always doing." And I thought that was a nice quote. Let me start also with the word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we are very grateful for this night, and we are thankful for the occasion that brings us together to discuss the city of Centerville's business, and also what many of these people that have joined us are here for, the swearing of a couple of new police officers. We're grateful for their diligence and those that protect us. Police, fire, other departments within our city that keep our streets cleared and our city's looking nice. We're grateful that we have the ability to be here, and we are honored that the citizens trust us to do this. Bless us with wisdom and with good common sense and with a listening ear, that we may be able to accomplish those things that would be for the betterment of the city. Bless all of our families, wherever they may be, that they may be able to have thy blessings with them. And these things we ask for and say in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. If you would also rise with me and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance would be great. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this point in time, we'd rather than do our open session now, we would like to actually move to the swearing in of the new police officers. We have Christine Strong and Jason Shields, and looks like our chief is ready to address the issue.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council, members of the community, and it's my pleasure and honor to introduce to you our twoest new members to our police department. After a rigorous testing and hiring process, we have selected these 2 individuals, Christine Strong and Jason Shields, as our newest members of our department. I think everyone recognizes the importance of hiring good people and then training them and equipping them properly, as police officers are a critical and important human resource for any community to have, and they can make a significant impact in people's lives every single day that they work, and they interact with people at times of crisis and need, and so it's critical that we find good people. And I believe we found 2 outstanding individuals, and one of them actually, Jason Shields, will be working his first patrol shift tonight working graveyards, starting his field training. Christine has been on the job for a couple of days now. So I'd like to invite first Christine Strong up and just come up here with me. In a moment, I'll invite her husband to come join her as well. So Christine and her husband, Ken Strong. Ken is a captain with the Utah State Prison facility. Christine comes to us from adult parole and probation. Before that, she was in corrections as well, working at the prison. And so she's got 14 years of experience, law enforcement experience, coming to us. So she is a veteran officer coming to us. We've just got to train her how to do things in Centerville and do traffic stops and things like that adult parole and probation officers don't do a whole lot of. But we're very excited to have her with us. She is also currently in the Army Reserves, where she is in the military police there. She indicates that she enjoys spending time with her family, riding ATVs and motorcycles, and I wanted to be specific with her what kind of motorcycles she rode or rides. And Jeremy, I'm sorry, it's not a road bike, dirt bikes. So I told her she's she's higher on my list of people that I like. So, and also boating. She lives in Utah County, but they are looking currently for a home here locally. So hopefully they'll be moving a little bit closer. So if I could invite Jason Shields up now. Jason and his wife, Canola, they both live here in Davis County. Jason came to us from Davis County Sheriff's Office, working in the jail as a correctional officer with over 2 years of experience there. And those fields, the corrections field, have a lot of crossover to what we do, and there's a lot of knowledge that they bring with them, and ability to deal with people who we deal with on a regular basis. So it brings a very important element to their abilities here. Jason is a Utah native. He's got his 4-year-old son here with him and his wife Canola, and they've got another child on the way. I believe June is when they're looking to make that addition to their home. Jason also enjoys spending time with his family, and he is involved with Krav Maga, which is, did I say that right? Krav Maga, which is a form of
Martial arts.
Yeah, martial arts. Yeah. So be careful with him. So we before that he worked in the HVAC industry as a technician working on heating and air conditioning systems. So Jacob, you know, if we have a problem with our heater and air conditioning, that's about every other week here. So. So what I'd like to do now, if I don't know, Ken, do you want to continue film, or do you want to come up and join your wife and Canola? If you want to come up. And we'd like to do the pinning on the badge first, and then we'll do the swearing in. And Christine has selected Holly Coombs to do the pinning of the badge on her. Holly came to us from AP&P as well. And Holly actually recruited Christine, and so they're really good friends, and Christine has asked Holly to do the pinning of the badge. So if you would go ahead and pin the badges on your significant other. And then Mackenzie, I think we're ready to go. If we could, why don't we have the two of you just come up here to the front, and Mackenzie will give you the oath of office.
Okay. You'll raise your right arm to the square and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear.
I do solemnly swear
That I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the
Constitution of this state,
and that I will discharge the duties
and that I will discharge the duties
of my office with fidelity.
of my office with fidelity.
Your last one, and welcome.
If you want to shake the hands of our council mayor. And then I have one more introduction after this. So these two officers will be doing our field training over the next 3 months. And Jason will be doing some additional training through the academy.
I haven't felt it yet.
We have one more member of the department to introduce to you as well, and that would be Canine Reyna. And the handler is Colton Robinson. So Reyna was recently purchased through the use of some generous donations. And so currently she's in the academy, or in the Canine Academy with Colton. Colton is going through training as a handler. It's a 2-month academy. And we have been just getting glowing remarks and feedback on Reyna and how well she's doing. All the instructors, and maybe Lieutenant Robinson can address that because he was a canine officer himself, but maybe talk a little bit about the canine and the canine program.
Yeah, so it took us a while to find the right fit for our department on this dog. We turned down probably 12 or 15 other dogs that we took a look at. I know a couple experts in the field that I asked to help me pick one out. I did canine for about 10 years, but I don't consider myself an expert. But we utilized the help of an expert, and we went and we found Canine Reyna, and Colton, this expert of mine, and I all felt really strongly about this pup. And after Colton gave this dog about 5 baths, she's now welcome in our building. But that's what happens when you come out of a kennel. But anyway, we're glad to have her. It's a 2-month process to train these dogs for narcotics detection, and it's a lot of work. It's a full-time job for 2 months to train these dogs to a certification level without getting into too much detail. But we appreciate Colton's work, and we're looking forward to Reyna working on the streets in both public relations and locating narcotics.
Zan, how do you spell Reyna?
It's R-E-Y-N-A.
Thanks, Colton. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. I think that's it. We're pretty excited about our 2 new additions. Thank you.
3 new additions.
Yes, and we're excited too. Now,
Actually, 3 new additions.
yeah. I had a chance to talk with some family member of Christine and Jason before. Is there anybody who wants to tell us stories about them so we have something to hold over their heads? Or if not, I know I talked with many proud parents and grandparents and family members, and we are thrilled to have you here with our police force, and you can tell the chief is as well too. And thank you, everybody, for being here, and we're looking forward to working with your relatives. So you could stay, but we're going to move on to the next part of our meeting if you want to go. So thank you. Council members, anything?
Okay, Chief, one more, or 2.
Yeah, we will.
I want to.
All right, so back to our agenda. We will skip back to the open session. This is where anyone in the audience is allowed to come up and address any subject that's on their mind, keeping their comments, to, if they would, to a couple of minutes. And this is We do have a public hearing later on a zoning code amendment, so we will be having a public hearing on that, so we will, no need to discuss that. It would be any other issue other than that public hearing. So the open session is now open for anyone that wants to come forth. Just come to the mics and introduce your name and where you're from.
Hi, my name's Dee Evans. I own the property at 551 West Lund Lane, which is number 7 on the agenda. I didn't know if you guys are going to give us a chance to speak. I was able to get 3 packets out to you guys today. I just got informed yesterday via taped envelope and then emailed today about the water drainage issue on my property. In the packet, I showed several pictures. Some of them are predated. What I did in 2018 was I built a berm out of clay to go 6 feet out from the fence so that any water coming from the Woods Park, I could document it. Every 2 days during the summer, I'd get 8 to 10 inches of water in that berm. And Corey has said that it's from other drainage everywhere else. But in my mind, during the summer, they're overwatering their grass. Oakwood homes, the bubblers from the roofs run into the rain gutter, goes down, over, and instead of the land drain or whatever it is called, it goes in, pops up those little heads, and they're 18 inches away from my fence, which is 15, 20 feet away from their 8-inch drain grates. In the picture, you'll see one grate that's sticking up 3 or 4 inches that has a shadow underneath it. To me, that's not a drain. That's not a floor drain. That's not a drainage to haul water anywhere other than not there. I failed to mention in the pictures, you see the green pipe out in the roadway towards the frontage road. That is taken during a rainstorm. No water runs out it. Guess where the water goes? Doesn't go out into the retention of the frontage road there. I have more pictures if you would like. I kind of threw this together last night. But I have pictures clear back to 2015. That first page.
Excuse me just a minute. Mayor, would it be better that we have Kevin and Randy here? They're coming later to make their report. And these things, Dee may want to say these things at that time.
Okay, well, I just didn't know if you guys were going to let us, because we've been here before when there's an agenda going on, and we don't get to talk.
Well, you're a specific agenda item, so I
Okay.
think it would be appropriate.
Dee and I have that right to be able to allow the public to speak on any issue that's on the agenda item.
Because when I read it,
Or
it
that's an
said
agenda
staff
item.
report.
Yeah, yeah, they were
And
going
I
to come
didn't
back
know
with
if-
their report, but,
Okay.
and that would probably be the best, because they've done a report, and then you can hear their report as well, too.
What's
at the
interesting
same
to me
time,
that they
so.
can write a report, and they have never talked to me as a landowner. I don't know if they've talked to my neighbor Bill. I let Bill know that this was going on tonight because this directly affects him. And I don't know that the Garlic's ever got notice of it.
Let's wait to see what their report is, and how it does affect you.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Because I know when I was here before, you guys, I should have brought pictures then, but I didn't. So I tried to supply them to this time.
So,
if you have any questions, ask me.
okay.
But I have pictures clear back to 2000, prior to 2015, which is Dave Walker left that voicemail that Oakwood was working on a thing, but that's been 3 years, 4 years? Going on
Okay.
4 years.
Yeah. Thanks, Dee. Yeah, we'll handle it all there at one point in time, all together. Let's go to, any other comments for the open session? If not, we'll close the open session and we'll go to item number 2 on the agenda, minutes review and acceptance from the January 15th City Council meeting and the January 2nd special meeting. Any thoughts or comments, changes, clarifications on those minutes?
On the 15th, on page 3, line 32.
Page what, did you say?
Page 3, line 32. It says, Councilwoman Meekum said she got the impression watching the most recent Planning Commission meeting that the commissioners did not fully understand that the proposed amendments will benefit more than just the fire station. What I was trying to say, I hope I said it correctly, was that I don't think that they understood that it would benefit the fire station. And then to go on and say, and, you know, proper grammar, but and that the community would benefit from a better fire station, and also the other property owners on Main Street would benefit if these amendments were approved.
Okay, we can make
I'm
that
good
change.
with that.
Any other comments on the minutes? If not, I'll look to accept a motion to approve the minutes with that one change that Councilwoman Meekum talked about.
Motion to accept or to approve the minutes of January 15, 2019 and January 22nd, 2019 as amended.
Second.
Motion, it's been, there's a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. We'll go to item number 3 on the agenda. This item is to determine whether to contract with the county for municipal elections. We will have Mackenzie Wood give us a little history of that and upcoming what may be happening.
Mayor, Council. So as City Recorder, one of my other jobs is to be the elections officer for the city, and 2019 is a municipal election year. We have a few spots open this year, and the past 2 elections, 2017 and 2015, we have contracted with Davis County to run our election, and their system to run the election is by mail with a day of polling location. That used to be called a hybrid system, but now it's just called by mail, and that's integrated into the polling locations, integrated into the by mail system. So Davis County has reached out to us, and we don't yet need to enter into agreement with them. They're working on an interlocal agreement for contracting for their services, and I'm just bringing that to your attention. We don't need a firm yes on it yet. But that will come up again in April. So the interlocal agreement, they'll then give it to us and we can review it.
And it's specific for this election year?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, Mackenzie, are you addressing the council now because they are trying to determine how many of the cities are going to contract, and that may affect how the costs are spread in the agreement that they're going to draft?
Yeah, so originally in the documents that the county gave out, they said, let us know by February 11th if you'll be contracting with us. And then I called the auditor, Brian McKenzie, and said, that seems hard to say yes if we don't have a contract. He said, oh, no, I don't need a firm yes. Just let me know if they're considering looking at the contract with them. So that's what I need to know, is if we're still willing to work with the county, see the contract that they're going to give us, and to move forward with that.
And it would be staff's recommendation that we contract with the county again.
I thought maybe that's why she brought her box of tissues, was in case we said no.
No, that was supplied for me, so there we go.
Marcia used to bring her box of tissues in case we said no.
Imagine it saves you work, it saves us time, money as well too, correct?
It does, yes. Yes, there is a lot involved in running an election, and they've got it down to an art.
Sometimes.
Science.
So does
It's
anybody
kind
need
of
to
an art.
ask Mackenzie further? Did you have more? I'm sorry, I don't want
No,
to cut
that's
you
all.
off.
Will it be totally by mail again?
So It will be totally by mail. Everybody who's registered will receive a ballot, but if they choose to come on election day, there will be a polling location
Here?
here.
And I assume it's roughly the 17,000 for the primary and similar for the...
Yes, the estimate that they've given us tentatively based, assuming everybody participates, everybody in the county participates, that's the rough estimate.
I'm okay with participating as long as the county knows that their elected officials are really interested in ranked choice voting for the next election cycle.
They are aware, yes. Okay.
So do we have a,
We don't need a motion.
I think
Or
really
should
what
we
we
have a
need to
motion?
know is if there's some pushback and we have to do more research on an alternative, then we should take the time to do that, but we're hoping that you aren't going to give us that assignment.
a recommendation then the council's okay with?
Council seems to be supportive, but can we?
I would prefer to do our own, but we looked at the cost the last time, and it would be foolish, so.
Yeah. I'm with Bill. I'm not thrilled that the county, I don't know. You can't really call it a monopoly, but we don't have a lot of other options, so.
Well, at least with their mechanisms, the voter turnout has gone up with the vote by mail options, so that's good.
Sometimes.
So I think you have I think everybody's on board that you can go back to the county and say that.
Get the agreement ready.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yep.
will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, item number 4, this is a public hearing item. This is zoning code amendment CZZ 12.12, definitions, permanent cosmetics, personal care service, and tattoo establishment. We have, to start this, we have staff presentation, and it looks like it's going to be Cassie Younger.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. So this is an applicant-driven application for a zoning text amendment in regards to personal care and tattoo establishment with the addition of permanent cosmetics to our definitions. So Taylor Davis has a business up in Farmington and also one here in Centerville that she would like to move full-time here in Centerville. But she's run into some issues because part of her business involves microblading, which is a form of tattooing on the eyebrows. So it's classified as a tattoo, and tattoos aren't allowed here. But personal care is allowed here, which is what she's running her business under now. So we've recommended just to expand that personal care service to extend into personal cosmetics, because not only is microblading, which is tattooing eyebrows, becoming more and more popular, but there's also other forms of permanent cosmetics that people get, like tattooing eyeliner or a lip liner on their face, which is all meant to look like makeup and isn't really confused with like a body art tattoo. So there should be a distinction between permanent cosmetics and a tattoo parlor that you would see with the more artistic stuff. So we just suggested to incorporate this permanent cosmetic procedure, like microblading and permanent makeup, into the personal care definition so that she can operate all aspects of her business here in Centerville. Tasked at the Planning Commission with a lot of technical questions about what microblading is, so I think Taylor would be happy to tell you about that if you guys have any questions about that.
Before we go to Taylor and the applicant's presentation, the questions for Kathy? Okay. All right, so we'll move to the applicant presentation. Just for the record, state your name and where you're from. We'd appreciate it.
My name is Taylor Davis. I live in Woods Cross, but I own a salon in Centerville. I'm in the same building as the Pitts and Arbuckle Dentistry. I have been in business for about 4 years. I started in Farmington, wanted to expand, so I moved part-time to Centerville, and then after I had leased my space, ran into a couple issues as far as the services that I offer. So right now we do like eyelash extensions, we do waxing, stuff like that. But the other thing that we do offer, which this is the issue, is microblading, which is just a very natural enhancement to the eyebrows. We do a lot of work on women with alopecia, who are undergoing chemotherapy. So it's meant to just mimic natural eyebrow hairs. And they're required to come back yearly for touch-ups, so it's not super permanent. There's definitely a fine line between semi-permanent and permanent. There is a confusion there within the community. Some people would call it semi-permanent. But my clientele is women between the ages of 25 and I have a 90-year-old client also. So I have lots of different women within like all different ages. And I don't know if you guys know what it is, if I can answer any questions, clarify anything.
I do have one question. Is there professional certification or licensure to do these procedures?
There is. So you have to complete some sort of certification course, and then we're certified from the health department. So as far as I'm an esthetician, but you don't have to be an esthetician, but yeah, you do have to have a certificate and be certified from the health department.
Is that the Davis County Health Department or
Yeah.
state or
Davis County. Mm-hmm. And they require several things like bloodborne pathogens, so you have to be certified in that, first aid, CPR, that kind of stuff.
Are you required to have biomedical waste disposal on site or anything
You
like
do.
that?
You have to have a sharps container. All your trash has to be disposed of in biohazard bags, so the health department does check all of that.
There are further questions of Taylor?
Possibly after the public hearing, but I don't think it's going to be a long one.
Okay.
Are we good?
Thanks. Stay around
thank
though.
you. Okay. Yeah.
All right, so we're now to the portion of the public hearing portion. So for anyone to come up from the public to address this matter, ask any questions. So the public hearing is now open. So I hear no comments for the public hearing, so I will close the public hearing. And no response that anyone needs to make to the public's comments. So I then would open it to any further questions for staff or the applicant from
I do have
any
one
council
question
members.
for Lisa. My line of questioning was trying to structure around, do we need to tie anything to the definition relative to enforcement? That you have to be licensed, or is this definition okay, and then we have other provisions, it's enforcement by the health department? How do we, because we're going to the trouble of making a definition, what's the enforcement related to this, potentially towards licensure or otherwise?
I think the definition is sufficient because the health department actually has the jurisdiction regarding licensing, but Corey can weigh in on that.
To add in, the zoning is the use, but the licensing program for business license to operate, there is a checklist and they have to go through the health department for their approval on the checklist. So the business license will enact the automatic review and verification of the health department.
You clear there?
I think so. So what I'm hearing is that if someone applies for personal care services license in Centerville, this definition is part of a checklist if they're offering this service?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant?
Motion to adopt ordinance 2019-02, including the definitions of permanent cosmetics.
Second.
We have a motion in 2 seconds. There's a tie. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or debate on the motion? If not, we'll start with, we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, I didn't, aye. Couldn't tell where she was in line over there.
You didn't point an arrow.
Didn't know if it was dealer left or dealer right.
We always go right.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 4-0. Thank you. We will now move to item number 5 on our agenda, the Building Inspection Services Report. I think that we have a couple of staff that's going to address this. Steve's going to talk about our history a bit, and Corey's talk about other cities and what they may be doing. And so, Steve, do you want to start it, kick it off?
Yes, please, thank you. I've recapped the history back to the year 2000 of how we have provided building inspection services in the city. Just in the way of review, prior to 2000, we had an in-house full-time inspector. That we were struggling with turnover in the building inspectors over several years, quite a frequent turnover. And so we decided to try a contract approach, which we started with FPM, and then switched to Sunrise Engineering in 2002. The Sunrise contract was renewed in 2004. 2006, the city decided to convert back to in-house inspection and then hired the Sunrise inspector as our employee. At some point, though, thereafter, we decided we needed to supplement that with a contract from the outside. That's what happens in the housing business, you know, over time. And so we approved a 2-year contract with Sunrise Engineering in 2007. For the supplemental inspector, in addition to the in-house inspector. Then the in-house inspector resigned and due to some extensive health issues. And we continued at that point. We relied entirely upon the Sunrise contract for the services. That 2007 agreement established the rates that we have been paying ever since then, the hourly rates. That 2007 agreement also did allow, however, for a couple of rate increases at 4% a year for each of the 2 years. But the Sunrise never asked for those. So we continued with the rates that were established in 2007. When the two years expired on that agreement, it was a discussion Corey and I had as to whether we just continue on an open-ended basis until the company asked for a rate increase, and then at that point we would bring the matter back to the council. Well, they've never asked for a rate increase. We have felt like it's been in the city's interest to continue with them as long as they've held firm on their rates, and we were satisfied with their quality of their service, which Corey has been. So that's where we are today. We would recommend as staff that we continue with an open-ended arrangement, whether we put in place a new contract with an open-ended clause to it, or we just continue operating like we are. I mean, one or the other we would recommend rather than going out again to bid. Our purchasing policy does not require us to put this out for a bid. I will note that our contract with ESI Engineering was last approved or amended a number of years ago. I'm going to say 6-8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And it has been an open-ended contract with no termination date. I mean, you have the ability to terminate it at any point, but it doesn't have a termination date. They have the right to come back and ask for a rate increase, at which time we can consider whether we want to accept that or take some other approach. But they haven't come back with a rate increase, so we've just continued on that open-ended approach with the ESI under the contract that is still in place from years ago with them. So that's some history, and the other piece is what are some of the other entities doing. Corey's going to provide that.
Well, apparently you haven't seen it. It hasn't been posted on your agenda.
What?
Those attachments that I sent for the agenda, I had my memo, and then I had the backup report, and I had the spreadsheet, and
Oh, man.
and the 2018 year approvals. So I can discuss a few things, but you probably want those documents.
While you're doing that, I'll see if I can get it on my email.
Some point in time.
Yeah, if I just see your 2 pages, that memo.
That's just the memo. There's a
Yeah.
background attachment that shows the 5 cities in the county, and it also shows you last 2018's information through the quarterly reports. So I suspect that I can answer some questions, but probably making a decision, you want to go through that information. And so you might want to look at tabling it to another meeting to discuss. Just by memory, since I don't have it here, I contacted the cities, so I did North Salt Lake, Bountiful, which is all in-house, Woods Cross, West Bountiful, Farmington, and Davis County on their inspection services. The differing, you have North Salt Lake that has 1 inspector that's in-house. They use Sunrise as a backup. You have West Bountiful that is using entirely staff. They have 2 people in there. Farmington is using staff. Farmington does use Sunrise on an on-call basis, particularly with the building of the station park, their extra loads, they will use Sunrise. The rest of the cities, but Woods Cross uses Sunrise. Woods Cross did a bid, I think, in 2015. They went with Forsgren. There were some issues that they felt with leaving of an employee of Sunrise and Sunrise contract, and some disputes that are occurring on there. So 2015, I think it was, they went to Forsgren. And I put in that spreadsheet what their costs are. The county is all a fee-based. So county is 80% of your plan review and 80% of your building permit revenues. And in the documents, you'll see what Centerville pulled in 2018. We pulled in a little over $301,000 just in building permit fees. Now that doesn't include the over-the-counter mechanical. It doesn't include the park impact, the fire impact. It's just plan review and building permit associated with the valuation where the numbers were run against. The highest is Davis County. If I remember right, into the spreadsheet or in the second attachment, out of the 300, now this is where it's not scientific. I don't know what all their charges and what their total accounts occurred for all their building permits. I just took their rates and compared them to 2018 of Centerville. So it's not apples to apples, but it's the best way I could to show you what the charges would equate to. The county at 80%. Yeah, these are the different ones. The other attachment, or the other one's in my staff report. But this is a schedule, so I'll just go back and repeat that. If we look at, I think you can't say comparable, but the closest comparable is going to be Woods Cross in my mind in discussing with them. But let's go here. You've got Sunrise at North Salt Lake as a secondary. Bountiful's employees, Forsgren as associates, as Woods Cross. That was the bid, I think, in 2015. West Bountiful uses Sunrise Engineering. Centerville currently uses Sunrise Engineering. Farmington, as I said, was when they have the work overloads. They also then use on an hourly basis or professional service fee basis Sunrise Engineering. And then the county uses John Hanson Code Services, which is a former employee of Sunrise Engineering, and went and broke out onto his own. So you can see that Sunrise is predominantly used in the South Davis area, and I make the argument in the memo that the reason they try to do something is it keeps their inspectors in the area and they can cover each other, and they have their own 1-800 number for inspections and so forth. Just the amounts that are here in the table, the staff report comparing it to our 2018 numbers. The best deal on the planet right now for the South Davis area is West Bountiful. West Bountiful is $50 an hour for both plan review. They have a very low workload but they do get the best price, and they are using Sunrise Engineering for it. If you look at the numbers, I think they're around, what was it, 219,000. If we used our numbers of 301, I think they get 265 or something like that. I'll pull those numbers up in a second. You see the county, this is the other end. This is all fee-based, a percentage of your building permits, and it's 80% of each category. We're at an hourly rate. Others are at hourly. You can see Forsgren is using $53 an hour, but a percentage, so they're hybrid. But if they have to do a structural review, it's $145 an hour. They don't do a lot of structural reviews, but that's part of it. Sunrise does have an in-house structural review engineer in their system. We're more than West Bountiful, but we're hourly still, 92 and 69 for those amounts. So when you look at what I think is comparable, so this would be the staff report to you. Get this
Do you want him
pulled
to
up.
bring up the staff report?
Yeah, that might be better for everybody to see. There's a table in there. And that's just using our numbers to give you kind of an idea of costs. And so Centerville, our total contract for last 2018 was a little over $65,000. That's a mileage. So when I compared these numbers, not everybody has a mileage. It's so there's $2,000 or $3,000 worth of mileage that's in there. But just using the plan and review fee and the permit fee, Centerville, out of the $301,000, that was our total revenue in those two categories. It's not revenue or costs because we have all this overhead and everything, but as we pulled in, that's what we've collected in fees. You can see if we take out the cost of our charges, we're at $239,000. I don't like showing these numbers this way because everybody thinks it's cash in pocket, and it's not, because there's 10 other staff that are touching these permits and processing these permits and can take a considerable amount of time. And then if you put the other overhead costs in the operations of the city, it's not a windfall of money compared to a $13 or $14 million budget. So Woods Cross, that's the comparable. That's the Forsgren. As you can see that their charges under the 2018 with the hybrid system of the percentage and the hourly rate, even though the hourly rate is lower, Forsgren would have, if we were contracted at that cost, it would cost us more with Forsgren. West Bountiful, you can see, that's the lowest one, the best deal in the South Davis area. They come out with $262 for internal costs to coverage, and you can see Davis County gets the goose egg, as I would call it. I don't know if Davis County feels that way, but from the flat rate fee, it would be pretty costly. Now, that's a little unfair to think of the county. They do have to hire somebody that can help inspect the production plants that are in the county. And so they do have to pay a little more for a skill set to handle those processing plants. So that's just trying to give you what it would cost. I think from my gut feeling, this is my gut feeling out there, if we go to a contract cost, we're going to probably be in this ballpark, or if there's another entity. The county actually pulled in 2 out California firms in their bid, and they went back to John Hanson Code. So they left and closed out John Hanson Code Services, went out to bid, went back to John Hanson Code Services. I don't have the explanation why, but that's what they went back to. So I think that's where we're on the tipping point. I like the hourly wage system, and so as Steve put in the memo to do an hourly wage, we're the only city that requires a time card from all the building inspectors. And we compare the time card to what's billed. And sometimes we come out a winner and sometimes we come out a loser. It balances itself out and gives a good checks and balances. Part of that checks and balances is I also know how long they're spending at an inspection time. You can see if there's an inordinate amount of time being billed. to there. So I do like the hourly rate because I can have a checks and balances against their invoice. And right now we have a good working relationship. The office manager in Fillmore just listens to Donna, and she gives them the numbers and they correct the invoice, and we don't have any more problems. So we've got a good working relationship that way, and I do like the hourly rate, but I don't know if we'll be able to continue the hourly rate into the future, particularly if we go back out to bids and we start changing firms. Now that sounds like the sky is falling statement. The reality of it is there's not a lot of companies out there that provide these independent services. And particularly now with the builders are needed, framers, the concrete people, they're needed. They don't cut out and become code inspectors as a secondary career for a backup. That's what you'll see. It'll be the ebb and flow of those who are familiar with the construction services will go and get their certifications if they don't have it and work for a company. Right now we're in a low period of inspectors. The in-house I wouldn't recommend. So no matter at any point, we need to go to a third party. By the time you look at somebody who has all the certifications, and then the amount of pay is going to be more than the 65 grand that we're occurring right now. If we were up at $150,000 worth of contract costs, maybe that would be something to think about. But the problem when we tried it before is if they call in sick or use any of that time, we still need a backup. So we always keep some type of fail-safe contract, and that's what we did, and Sunrise carried that in the past. So at this point, you don't have all of the information to pour through on the surrounding cities. From my position is third party is the route to go for cost-effective for the city. I think you well know that right now we feel that Sunrise provides us the services we needed. I provided you in that backup that you didn't see. The 2018 quarterly reports shows you the hours of inspections, how many they went on, how many they did within 24 hours, how many they didn't do within 24 hours, which were a few. But you're looking at 60 inspections done during a month and 2 that are missed in 24 hours, and there's a lot of excuses that can happen. Getting caught up on another inspection time, somebody else, some contractor wasn't ready for concrete and delayed the inspection, said come in 2 hours. 24 hours is our goal. That's a high standard. That is a first-class city standard. The state code says we have to provide them in a reasonable amount of time. They've talked about it maybe within 3 days of a phone call. That's been backed out through a lot of discussions, but we hit a 24-hour time frame to match what you would expect at a premium service. You call the day before, 24 hours later you'll have an inspection. And we're, I think 1 month the worst we missed was 2 out of the 60 inspections last year in 24 hours. So the transition to a new group could make that argument, but I think for the council, the most important factor is how do you want to make sure you feel comfortable with accountability of the finances. Professional service billing is an option. A contract is another option. Going out to formal bid is a third option that you can go through. We feel at this point in time going out to bid is not necessarily an advantage, but it may give you the security that you want. But I think we're within the ballpark range of what's happening in the costs, and now it's just the issue of open-end contracts. So if you want to go a contract basis, we could solicit Sunrise again if what they'll do in a contract. I think it would, my gut feeling is it would come out fairly decent. I don't think it's a panic to go to a contract. The question is, their last contract did have that they could approach the city 2 or 3 times for increases, didn't, so that's a good thing. But is it a more open-end contract where rather than limiting, saying they're only guaranteed this for 2 or 3 years? So it's really up to you, and you didn't get the information that I provided, so I have no heartburn if you say, let's review that and come back and talk about it at another meeting.
Yeah. We apologize. I didn't realize it wasn't.
So
we were missing something.
You may want to get this information. I have talked with Woods Cross Mayor, Rick Earnshaw, And they are similar to us in as much they have Sunrise, and they've been operating on an open contract as well too. But I did not talk with Mayor Campbell for Bountiful. Are they?
They're in-house staff.
They're in-house, Bountiful, go West Bountiful. So, and Mayor Earnshaw said that he and I talked, Mayor talked, he did his colleagues, and basically that, yeah, it's been a long time, and that, if they went out to bid, they don't know what they'd get, but you know, competition-wise, I've not looked into that. I don't know how many firms are out there. Corey says there's just
Yeah, we'd
a
probably
handful,
get 3 or 4 firms is my guess that would probably bid. And I don't know how Davis County got 2 California groups bidding.
Yeah.
So Corey, this, with having the chief in Eyeline, I was thinking, wait a minute, we just had a very successful transition of dispatch services to a sister city. Have you thought about approaching Bountiful and saying, are you guys 100% tasked out? Can we purchase services from you? Because if Bountiful's willing to build out capacity, and they're right next door, we've had other successful implementations.
I haven't thought about it. That's
I
something
mean, I
to
just
consider.
literally put it together the last like 10 minutes.
Yeah,
That might be an option.
That's certainly an option.
And I don't think it precludes us from using Sunrise, but we could potentially run both at the same time, I mean, just for cost, if it's available to us.
Yeah, I don't know how that charge would work, who gets the priority in the scheduling and all of those factors, and if their inspectors are busy, does that pull us back to greater than 24 hours? It's a matter of what goals you want to hit.
And if it does, then potentially we have the backstop of Sunrise as a contracted firm. I just think if we can build kind of South Davis County centralized services where somebody else is taking the payroll risk, I'm all over that.
And if you're talking to excess capacity like that, I mean, Corey just told us West Bountiful has an in-house too. I mean, so you'd probably want, if that is an option, city's close by,
yeah,
you know.
Half-baked idea, see what you can dig up. I mean, it'd be worth discussing if that's an alternative to have those both open.
Yeah, I think that's a brainstorming idea.
One of the benefits of that is that a little bit of competition keeps everybody a little bit more honest.
Right.
And making sure that they're keeping us happy.
Yeah, I've not seen that done with building services, but I'm not saying it's not possible to do it with building services either.
That way it's not a total table, it's got a takeaway to it.
Yep.
So other questions for Corey or thoughts, comments?
I was curious to know how many building inspector companies there are, but I don't know how to Google that without getting the ones that come and inspect your home for you and part of the search.
You know, I don't know how many actually are registered in Utah to provide those services. I mean, Sunrise, this is a secondary component to the main engineering firm that they do. Forsgren is the other firm I'm familiar with, and then I'm familiar with John Hanson. I talked to the county. That was how many, I know you went out to bid when John Hanson Code Services, you ended that contract, and then they went out to bid, and they said we had 5.
So do they
Two
have
of
to
them
be
were from
licensed
California.
with the state?
What's that?
Do they have to be licensed with our state to do it
The
in our state?
inspectors have to be licensed. The company is broad. It's just whether they provide a service.
So it's not, if we checked, we would just get how many inspectors, we wouldn't get how many companies if we checked with the state.
I would suspect we probably have a few companies, and that's going to be a small number, less than double digits, that are one-man operations. I think Sunrise is a unique situation where it's a subsidiary of their engineering firm.
And if we're trying to maintain a level of service on the service level type agreements, we would want something that's backstopped. So it by default would probably knock out one of the one-man shops, or unless they never sleep, sort of thing.
So what would you like to do? Would you like Corey to get back with the displays that we didn't see, and also inquire of other cities? What would, any recommendations on what you'd like to see happen?
I'd like to see the backup materials.
Well, can we,
I'd like to
if we just get that attached, are you okay to access it that way, or do you want it sent directly to you.
Either way.
Sure.
We'll put it, we'll add it to Novus. It was supposed to be on there and just an oversight, so.
The one of the reasons that I think this is an important thing is that we had one of these kinds of arrangements that had just been going on for such a long time, and at the end of the day, it had gone sour, and we didn't realize it. And that's the reason that I feel pretty significantly that we ought to look. I love George's idea. I don't know that we have to force it to go out to bid, but I think we ought to look and evaluate. So, that's my thought.
And to do that, to look and evaluate and due diligence, I mean, it's fair that everything Corey put together, the information that we get a hold of.
And I can certainly pull up the stuff if you attach it after the fact. I don't have any.
Right, and if you cast a line and there's no hits and there's no interest, then our path is kind of defined for us. But if there's another option, I'm all in.
Okay, should we head that direction? Any other thoughts on it before we move on? Great. Let's go to item number 6 on our agenda. This is a staff update regarding Foothills planning process. And Corey's jumping up again.
Yeah, Steve said this would just be a verbal update. February, was it 1st, 2nd? I don't know what we put for the Trails and Parks Committee to respond to we had a preliminary conditions report, for lack of better terms, and sent it out through Bruce to get with the Parks Committee and the Trails Committee. Last week I did get a page, maybe page and a quarter response from the Trails Committee. I printed some, but I neglected scraping the windows to get over here to bring the packet of the Trails Committee, but I'll get that forwarded to you so you can see what their response is. At this point, I've not heard from the Parks and Rec Committee in response that we offered to them. A couple of things just in context to where we're at. The idea was we come to this point in February, then I would take the information, draft a draft plan, and then the idea was potentially not fully decided upon, but the idea is pulling an ad hoc committee together with a council member, a planning commissioner, parks person, a trails person, whoever we want on the committee. 8 to 10 is about what you can deal with in an ad hoc committee. And the purpose of that was to get enough interested eyeballs on something to be able to have that committee debate what's in a document. And the concept of the document would be is I would craft the draft document, and then we would go through that with this ad hoc committee and bounce all the different ideas off and see if we're able to come together with generating a recommendation to the city council on managing the city's land. Now, to be honest with you, this is something that I'm just grabbing at because I've never had to manage a piece of property of this size in this condition, so I'm trying somewhat, not by the seat of my pants, but it feels like it a little bit, in how this would be approached. And I did show you some ideas because I'm in that planner hat mode all the time and thinking that we could come up with a master use plan for the property. In drafting and going through the skeleton that I've prepared, which is about 50% done, I realized that there's going to be no ability for this ad hoc committee to really reach out and make a good decision on whether ATVU should stay or go, whether the gun range should stay or go. I think those have components that are inherently important in themselves, and a greater dialogue should be happening than a city planner or an engineer trying to figure out how to plan and construct something on a piece of property and whether the road's sufficient or not, and we're absent the whole idea of the value of the gun range. And I use the gun range because that's what I heard in talking to the council before. This is one of the better long-range facilities in the state. You know, I could easily go in and say, everybody's afraid of a gun range, and so the gun range should be the only use there, and everything should go away if we're going to keep the gun range. Because I told you before, I'm not a gun person, so when I started hiking up there and hearing firing off shots, I'm already down, ducking and cover, and I'm I'm with Randy. That's probably half the problem. I don't know where Randy's boundaries are and my boundaries are. But I don't think I'm the expert in that and create that value. And so I've pared back in my writing and said, I think we can still come up with a master plan for the property, but it's really closer to a management plan, and then making a management plan assignments out to the entities that are best tooled to take care of something. So an example would be is if we're doing the Bonneville Shoreline Trail and we need to come up with how we, what the exact alignment is so we can apply for the grant money, because it can't be a mixed use trail. It's got to be a hiking trail only. And then the signing, the trail improvements on that, that's just beyond the skill set for this group and myself. So I'm paring back a little bit and saying we can come up with a management plan, and these are the things that we need to do with the management of the property, and these are what I've written in as goals and aims, and then assignment. Where that comes from is the emergency response plan. I don't invent the wheel if it's already been invented. I stole the format of the emergency operations plan, reformatted the ideas to fit, and come up with a skeleton for managing the piece of property, who's to go through, who's to vet out the number of issues, and then come back and carry their specific strategic plan for managing that specific item. But it's all couched under the umbrella of who's in charge and who's coming back with it and who's responsible for maintaining it. If we're doing drainage, who is that? Who's monitoring it? Who's checking that should be designed? Who's looking at the capital improvements plan? And so it's really giving that delegations to different entities to manage it. And so I think to say to you by June we can come up whether all of these uses and what they should be, I think is too far, too much. But it will come back to say, here's some critical infrastructure, here's some critical things that need to be happening, and here's the individuals in charge to come back and how we can accomplish that. Now that will frustrate at least the Trails Group. The Trails Group is very clear in their letter to staff that some of the things that we talk about when we talk about installing and using the area for a detention basin, installing an all-weather surface road, installing the necessary piping to carry it out over to Dual Creek, because those are the preliminary ideas in there, they're feeling like that's got to be accomplished, built, and done before any other talk could be done about their application that's due at the end of this month. And so they share that in a polite way. They share that frustration back to us. And just to be honest with you, I can't answer the total costs. We have some preliminary costs. I can't answer whether the all-weather surface road should go in before the Trails Committee should be able to move and do what they want. I'm not sure that we've vetted enough with anybody to make that decision. I think we can accommodate Trails Committee desires. I think we can accommodate recreational uses in the ATV, but as we vet those out and to what extent is how we'll define the accommodation. And I think that just takes a little bit more time. So I think at this point in time, I'm maybe seen as a greater hurdle to the Trails Committee, but that's my verbal report to you. I don't think we're really ready to vet. I think we can get to a point to be who's in charge and how is it going to take place and what are your goals to come up with, and then this is your assignment to take forward and move from there. So at this point, I'm 50% drafted. The idea was to take the rest of this month, but I got a couple of, because your next meeting is the Main Street plan and how we're going to accomplish that. And I think we can put an ad hoc committee together if that's still the direction you want to go, and have some eyes on all of this and get the different perspectives. And so take maybe the original little group that was together from staff and some residents and expand that a little broader, and then let people bounce off the ideas to each other of whether this is a reasonable management plan. And then that committee would recommend something official to you that I think can be done, May, June. So that's my report. A little disappointing maybe.
Any questions? I also want to get Bruce up here to talk about what he's been doing with Hillside, if you guys want to hear that first. Isn't that why you're here, Bruce?
Just if you have any questions about the grant, I've been steeped in meeting all the requirements to. I've been working on, been to workshops, I've spent days, and I've got letters of support requested from lots of different agencies and entities. And just if you have questions about the grant itself, if, whatever.
Well, I think you should tell them about the county's interest and willingness, Bruce.
Sure. So I've solicited from Jeff Euler, the county, to a request for $30,000 to go towards this in the event that we receive the grant request of $60,000 from the state of Utah. And I have not heard back yet. I've just made the request, and also a request for a letter of support from the Office of Economic Development from the county. And I suspect in the next week or so I'll get an answer and those things. But other questions? The deadline for the grant is the end of the month. Steve called me this morning, and I have written in my notes February 14th, but that was my own personal deadline to try to have everything pulled together and ready to go so it could be reviewed. But the actual submittal deadline is the 28th of February for this grant.
Bruce, how much time does the entity have to spend the grant money to accomplish the project?
You have 2 years to complete the project. Part of the application is submitting a timeline, but I'm not. Their requirement is that you complete it in 2 years, but the money is available. It's how it is they'll review the applications. They'll let the projects know that get selected to be awarded the money, the grants in April. You then have 2 months to sign the contract and get a contract back to them, and then from then you can start right in on your project. And I called and actually talked with them about, hey, we have the design. If the contractor's available, he's told us he can do the work in 30 days. He can finish in a month. He could build the project that we're talking about. Would there be money to reimburse us, come August, September? And the answer is yes. She says, yeah, the money's there. If you've got your project done and want to start submitting for your reimbursements, that they would be able to do that, and you'd be able to have your trail being used this fall.
So I'm probably going to be the bad guy, but what I'm hearing is two mutually exclusive dates. You're looking for something in February, you're looking to deliver in May. And I'll go back to what I said last time, which is I don't feel an extreme urgency to do this year. I'm not going to hide behind you, Corey, but I'm feeling that there's justification for a little bit more time in it. Is this a one-time only offer, or we can repeat this process again same time next year as far as going for the grant?
I would suggest you don't apply for it if you're not planning to use it, or we change the timeline that if we apply for it and we plan to use the full 2 years before maybe we don't do construction this year, we do construction in 2020, but we make that clear in the application, or just wait and apply for it next year. Because I think applying for it and then not accepting after they've gone through all the work to award it to you. And to be honest with you, our project really fits this grant really well. It's exactly the kind of thing they're looking for, is our trails and mountain bike facilities, and things is exactly what the Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant is designed for. So it's a good fit. I think we have a really good chance if you want to go for it, but I wouldn't recommend going for it if you don't want to go for it.
We got some somewhat negative news park-wise, because the federal budget is not renewing the grant that gave us the money for Island View Park. Next year.
Land Water Conservation federal grant.
What's the chance that kind of an issue will hit this grant?
It's a
state of Utah,
not federal.
Right, money, and every year they have to, and it changes. The amount of money they award each year is different. I can tell you.
You're talking about what the legislature appropriates into this fund.
So they do a full grant award. They empty their pool every year, or they have carryover.
I don't know exactly the answer to that, but I do know that the total number that they award has been growing each year. Okay. It started out They were just doing $5,000 and $10,000 grants, and now they're doing much more and hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant money this year, I think.
Is this the same grant where they have to get matching funds as well, too?
This is a matching grant. The Utah Outdoor Recreation, yes, it's much less restrictive than the federal grant in that you're only required to maintain it for 10 years, where the federal grant's in perpetuity.
I'd like to share a thought. This is a real dilemma for the Trails Committee, obviously. And yet, this piece of property is a great potential amenity for the city, waiting to be improved and better utilized. And in my mind, we need to take a very serious look at how to fund those drainage and road improvements that we have been looking at. And I believe we have the ability to get that drainage, that first phase drainage system in within the next year. And then if we don't move forward and try to figure that out, we're just going to be every year saying, oh, we're going to put them off, we're going to put them off. I really hate to put the Trails Committee off.
Well, and I might mention our city engineer said those improvements would not impact one way or another whether you built your mountain bike facility.
Right. The issue has been the access for the users, and yet it's access issues for other users, the gun range users. They're complaining about the condition of the road. People who drive up there to park at the trailhead.
And I understand that they want that amenity, and now it's hot, it's wonderful. People want to be up there on the hill biking, but the difference between applying this year and applying next year, in my opinion, could be the difference between a well-executed project that includes enough planning to allow us to account for drainage, account for other compatible uses, and just have what I would hate is we go out for this money, we come back with the planning exercise and find out that we're not really suited to do exactly what we want to, or there's another use, and then we end up pulling back from the commitment. I would hate to do that. I'd rather be fully committed based on a plan to seeing the execution of a mountain bike trail as part of the full plan. I know that's not what the Trails Committee would want to hear, Robin, but I feel like to me it's like my personal home improvement projects where I buy all the flooring, start cutting, and then realize my wife doesn't like the color, but it's too late. I'm committed at that point. I'm having a lot of hesitation about proceeding on a grant this year.
Yeah. I'm with you on that.
The stringing out is the problem I have with. I mean, you tell the Trails Committee last year that, hey, we're going to let you know by next year. That's just
the grant application asks for your process and what you've done leading up to this, and it started in 2016. This time of year in 2016, so they actually started off with plans to start building the trail themselves, and then evolved into, no, we ought to have it professionally designed, and anyway, it's been a process since spring of 2016 when the Trails Committee started working towards this. So it's not something they've just come up with that is hot right now.
No, but let me rephrase that. I understand their enthusiasm for it, but there's been no other planning. They have been focused on this item, and to just, I would say, laser focused and blinders to the other options up there on the hill.
Oh, I was going to say that's not true. As a matter of fact, we just finished 5 miles of, or was it 4 miles of inner city bike trails that they've also worked.
No. I'm talking relative to the hillside use. I'm not. This is the tough part. I'm going to get misquoted no matter how I say this. I appreciate what they're doing, and I appreciate what they've been able to accomplish. When I look at this project, anytime I talk to any Trails Committee member about the hillside, all I hear is mountain biking. I hear nothing about other uses, and that's why what I'm hearing from Corey sounds reasonable. Is I'll get you something in. Sorry, I'm going to say May, right? Something in May that contains enough of a management plan that we can parcel these out and make the commitment solid for a mountain bike trail on the following year. I mean, is that a fair statement?
Sure, and I don't disagree with that. I do know that they went to a lot of effort to work with the gun club and also to make sure that their plan worked around the concerns of the neighbors. They've made changes and adjustments in both situations of where to have access to and to accommodate the existing uses of ATV, regardless of whether there's improvements in that area or not. So they have made some real efforts to make sure that their plan does not compromise your other uses, and you're not closing the door to your ATV use, your gun use, your other uses by agreeing to move forward with this project. But I agree, if you I'll do what you want me to do.
Sure. I'm looking at it as from the access issues, the drainage issues up there.
Mm-hmm.
If none of those are solved and we create, well, let's just call it what it's going to be, a world-class amenity that we had a whole room full of people and not many of them lived in Centerville saying they were going to come and use this. That's a lot of traffic. That's a lot of infrastructure stress on something that people are already saying is subpar. So I'm having a hard time trying to put the use in front of the facility. That's where I'm trying to go. I may be alone in that because it's really quiet.
No, you're not alone in that. I agree with you. And it's hard when there's been so much work done so far, and I know that feels like we're not going to do it. But really, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And I'm with George. I think the prudent thing is to make sure that we've got all our ducks in a row and that the road and the drainage are already taken care of, because even if the trail itself doesn't go into the drainage issue section, there's still access stuff that needs to be dealt with, and I'd rather have that taken care of first rather than be behind the thing all the way along.
So to give Bruce some clarification in the messages he has to take back regarding access, you've heard the Trails Committee say, hey, we don't need to use that road. We can have people drive up to the Parish Trailhead and over to the Twin Hollows Park in Bountiful and bike in from there. I think you need to make it clear whether that's an acceptable option or not, and so he can at least convey that message back.
Yeah, because somewhere along the line, I heard it, a week, 2 weeks ago, that this application is going forward. So I assumed based on the hillside study that everything was all good to go, but so somewhere you started that process. That process was started for some reason.
Well, I think I can help understand that, because I got a call from the county asking about it, and I got the strong message that they were interested in providing some match money, so I linked Bruce up with them to start preparing an application. But at the time, I didn't think I thought our planning process maybe was going to conclude sooner than it is. So I can take some of the responsibility there.
I totally recognize what George is talking about. That makes sense. Is there a way that we can go ahead and apply for the grant and get something going this year, recognizing maybe, for example, with what you just said, Steve, that parking access is restricted to the two ends and not where we'd really like to put it, so they can at least get something started this year, recognizing that we're still kind of in process about what the whole project is. I don't know. Is that?
Bill, I think that, and I haven't studied it closely. There weren't backup maps and things, and I didn't dig through the old stuff. But if you're going to come from the south, from Twin Hollow Park, you're going to be coming across the detention area that Corey's talking about. So that impacts the area that we're concerned about.
No, it's below that.
It's below?
The access trail's below.
The access trail's below.
Yes,
okay.
well below.
So if So,
In
okay,
fact,
so
it
that
would be via,
resolves
it'd
part
be
of it.
via the maintenance road there.
Even below that, the park's lower than that. It comes up to the maintenance road and then comes back down. So yeah, you're well below the dike area.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
Stephanie, interrupted.
But if the only users were going to be our trails people and their immediate contacts, and they could say, no one's going to go up the middle access and park there, then there might be a way. But you can't just block off the access there and say nobody can go to the gun range except via Twin Hollow. If the attraction is there, people are going to look for the closest place to park. I mean, you go down to Dick's Market, there are parking stalls clear out to Parish Lane, but nobody's parking out by Parish Lane, even though they have legs and they can walk, you know? So if there's a closer way, they're going to take the closer way, and if that closer way isn't up to the traffic, then we're back to the trouble.
But those are things that are happening today anyway.
They
Yeah.
are, but we aren't adding
And-
all of the extra
and
people.
a lot of your cyclists are
coming to the
looking
new-
for a 5 or 10 mile ride. They're when you go to Dick's Market, you're not looking for your longest way to get to the door. The reason why you're going running or walking or cycling is to get in a certain amount of minutes of exercise or a distance that you're trying to, hey, I'd like to get in 7 miles today, or so it's a little different than
Unless you're taking
yeah.
your kids, which was that little loop that you were showing
Yeah,
us. With
yeah.
the-
Right.
I mean, I think that
I
if you
think
build it, they will come.
If you're going to have an amenity,
Yeah.
you've got to be able to support it. And,
Right.
and I think if there was a soundbite to bring back to the Trails Committee, from me, I don't know about everyone else, I don't see a reasonable argument why there wouldn't be a mountain bike trail of some sort on the hill. It's a matter of sequencing. So, because I think this is getting cast sometimes in the light of the request for proper planning and drainage studies and everything else is an attempt to kill it. It's not. It's just to make sure the sequence is correctly and we do the best we can. So
Understood, sure.
I'm intrigued by Bill's idea of what can we do potentially to get it in this year. I hear hesitation that you'd rather not do it if there's going to be a change to it.
Well, just if there's a chance you're not going to accept the money, don't apply for the grant.
Right.
But if we're talking a 2-year time frame anyway, can we not apply for the grant but purposely show that the majority of the work's going to be done in the second year?
You know that. When does it fund? Oh,
When we
Funds
funded.
this summer, from what he said.
Yeah,
This summer,
yeah. As
sorry,
soon
I
as
missed
as
that.
soon as the contracts got signed end of May, you could start construction. Depending on your contractor, that's a variable of when they're available to come and start work and how quickly they can do the job. Back when we had our open house and they had drawn up the plans, the contractor that drew up the plans, which he's since got very, very popular. So we're not even sure the farther we go down the road, whether he'll even be available. He's being looked at projects nationwide now because he's so well known. He's been anyway. So if they were available, he said it'd be about 30 days for us to do the project. So it kind of depends on your contractor and their availability, how quick they can get on the project. But I think it's very reasonable to give yourself a 3-month period of good weather time.
So if I recall correctly, I mean, we had a layout, but the quoted price was in linear feet.
Yep.
I guess what I'm coming back to is the concept that we had with Island View Park, where once we accepted the grant money, we were locked into the amenities list.
Yes.
If we were to, I'm just curious if it's similar, if we accepted the grant money, are we locked into that loop design, or are we locked into total linear feet? How would we be constrained or not constrained?
I asked that question in the workshop that Steve asked me to go to on the grant, and if you have to cut out a part of the trail for another project, they would ask that you try to replace that much of the trail somewhere else or attach it onto another end. It's not as strict as the federal grant. There's not the penalties at all. It's a request that if for some reason you have to redesign it. A perfect example is Fruit Heights. They were behind us. They got things together. They applied for this grant. They got it last year. They've got it all built last fall and had people writing on it in November. It's already got a name on social media as Fruit Loops, which is not the city manager's first choice of names for their trail. But They have plans to develop a cemetery and some other things, which I think will be on your agenda later tonight. And they will have to rearrange some of that trail that was built with this very grant money. And they just plan to adjust it and move the trail to a second. And so they're actually applying again this year for a second of this Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant for their second phase to even improve upon the first phase that they built last fall. So, hopefully that answers your question as to how locked in you are.
Well, kind of what I'm hearing is it sounds like you could apply for the full amount, but if you don't do all the linear feet of the trail, they're not going to give you a huge heartburn.
No, that's not what he's saying. He's saying you have to do that many linear feet. If we commit to that, and then Corey comes back and says, you can only do half of that, we can't do that. We're committing, so if you say we're doing this round loop right here, then we come back and we go, we can't do this part here because that's where we decide to put the cemetery. That's fine, but then you have to take that and put it somewhere else.
And I don't think that's a problem. We've gone through probably 6 different design phases with different switchbacks and things. We could easily put in another switchback that accommodates something we have to take out.
So we do need to do that many linear feet, but we would have to put it in somewhere else. So we are locked into that. We say we want to do this many feet. We are locked into it. I don't want to see us do it if we're going to not follow through, because I think the next year, they're not going to give it to us. So I don't want to risk it.
Well, but when you say not follow through, he said we have a 2-year period.
Right. I would feel more comfortable having all the information up front and saying, here's how we're going to fund the all-weather access, and this is the timeline of putting it in, rather than say, we need to short our city roads so that we can rush the stuff on the mountain because we're already well into our 2-year window of funding the trail. That's my personal opinion.
Corey, question for you. Given the discussion here with where Bill's trying to go on potentially applying for the grant, getting it, do you see a huge risk if the grant was awarded with the current design and what you're anticipating and envisioning parceling out to the various groups for further study or recommendation, that plan, their initial loop, is at huge risk of significant change? That was a very loaded 9-part question, but hopefully you got what the gist.
I split that in my mind into 2 factors of risk. The first factor of risk is your argument about supportive infrastructure. I think by May we will be able to definitively give the direction of how and what needs to take place to understand the access. Now I'm going to complicate it because I'm going to get in trouble for this. It's not just the surface road issue and the erosion that's going to take place. It's the issue of the speeds, the parking that occurs, the complaints from the neighbors down on 100. How is that managed? How is it signed? Do we close it off in the wintertime use? If we close it off, does that cause parking down below? There are a number of logistical issues that I'm seeing that take place. Now that has nothing to do with the threat of the trail yet, but the evaluation of the infrastructure to support it, and then the management after the infrastructure is yet to be decided. And the risk would be is that if we design it to do X and it takes Y to be supportive, then there's a risk. Because if there's some reason that the residents are balking at the traffic at 100 to get up into it, or the closure, and people park below during the wintertime and it's in their neighborhood, we have those logistics that we've got to, enforcement. It all can be accomplished. I don't think it's not accomplished. It's just a decision, and there's going to be some public input to those decisions about what happens as we widen the road or as they feel more traffic comes in. If we're going to do seasonal closures, what does that impact them? And I can't say that decision can't be made without vetting that out through the process. Can we build a road? Yes. Can we put in a drainage? Yes. Do we have the money and the timing? That's the big question, is the risk. Steve's saying within a year, maybe so, and I don't want to doubt him. But But there's the other elements of it that it will take place. If we're on a 2-year horizon, we can probably take that place, but if the public is disenchanted to some degree, you may think differently. And then that may be the alternatives issue of how do we, because I agree with the argument, if it's open, people are going to use it. It's just this, regardless of what they're doing.
And you can't
Now,
really you could close it off and just allow bicycle and foot traffic, but then your existing uses get shut off. That
yeah,
like
it's
to drive up there
it's a
to
consequence
use
to
their
the gun
ATVs.
range, it's a consequence
Yeah,
for the ATV
right.
use and so forth. So, but no, I think that can be done in a year, in a 2-year time frame, yes. Now, the threat of the risk, not the threat, the risk of the course. Certainly, I think mountain biking is going to occur up there because just the trail use of mountain biking is going to occur up there. A design course itself, the risk is twofold to me. If you're coupling that with the ATV use, we do hear, is it marshes? They participated into the program. Their big concern is dust. And so we might be able to control dust. But again, it's the flexive of engaging and vetting out that use with the public and coming up with how that plan of attack is going to take place. And then, again, getting myself in trouble because I'm speaking way too far ahead, it's the issue of the intensity of the course. Mm-hmm. Who's it designed for? How many participants? What's the parking areas for it? How does that compete with the ATV users in access to the trail and the uses of the courses? How big is it? You know, how big is the course? And I've heard a range because the Trails Committee met with the Planning Commission and the people that participated in that. It's not seen from my perspective. I'm not hearing that this is just a pass-through mountain bike or an occasional use of the course. This will be an active place. How active is that place? And is the Trails Committee come to a cap? Is there expansion, a second grant, like Fruit Heights is doing?
And they're hoping for that, but definitely they're hoping for a future phase to make it better. Yeah.
You know, because to me there's a difference between a course that's doing the rollers and the terrain park of it, which I think is the lower one, but other courses are the flow tracks where it's very competitive, very steep, big banks, big turns, and speeds are occurring into there. I don't know if that's their future plan or part of their plan, and I'm speaking out of probably turn because they probably have these answers. But I don't have these answers, and those are the questions that's coming up into the management plan that need to be answered.
Well, Tammy's not here to give the quotes she usually gives about proper planning for long-term use. I don't see, I can't find a compelling reason to not give Corey the time to come up with, it puts the grant process out 1 year. Totally understand that. But if we can deliver a product that the city staff collectively, I'm looking out at Randy and and Kevin, can support, that the infrastructure is there to support it, we get a great product.
And I don't think the efforts that we've put into, the time I put into the application, I don't think that expires. I think that same application can be submitted next year. And so I don't think, hopefully my time's not been wasted.
I don't think so.
I hope not. I hope we can reuse it, because I think the intent, at least from my perspective, would be to definitely be applying next year, fully armed with a management plan on how we're going to execute this.
Right.
I don't know, Bill. You're thinking the other direction, though. Maybe we can apply and figure it out as we go.
I'm just afraid that we got so far down the road with people, we're going to lose a ton of support and momentum. The other thing I'm afraid about is that 1 year isn't really enough. I guess I'd like to know what Randy's thoughts are about the difficulties of doing improvements. We don't even know what they are yet. But with the road and other things and the cost factors, I suspect my concern is that a year from now we'll be in exactly the same situation saying, 1 more year, guys, we're sorry.
there's always that potential that.
And therefore, I'm saying we're better off to bandage it and try and get through while we're doing the other.
I don't think you'll have the road problem solved in a year. I mean,
Randy, could you come up to the mic?
The cost of the road,
I don't think-
it's got to be ridiculous.
But if we can't get something in hand and under control in a year, we definitely are going not to do it in the 2-year time window to spend things.
Kevin and I just talked for a minute. One of our great concern is the design projects that we're trying to do this year. We haven't got that on the schedule to do the design, to do the build. We've got the decant station, we've got 4th East, we've got Main Street. We've got about 10 projects we're trying to hurry and get done this year. And getting it built may be difficult to try to get it built this year. We may have some money left over, or we may not, because with the decant station, it's going to take quite a bit of money as well. So from that perspective, we've got to make sure. One of the things we talked about yesterday morning was trying to get money from the federal government for mitigation up there in the dike and see if we can't get some money from them so that we don't have to take it out of our funds, from the general fund of the storm drain system.
Yeah, let's clarify what you're talking about, Randy. The funding for the drainage improvements would come out of the Drainage Utility Fund. And yeah, we have a number of projects tapping that fund, but it's also our healthiest fund. And in my opinion, by next year, we could fund the first phase of the drainage plan that Kevin and Randy came up with, which is that from the dike down along the road. And that would then serve as the foundation and that theoretically could include curb and gutter, I suppose, on the one side.
Yeah, there's no question. I think
with the catch basins into that pipe system, and that could, in my mind, all be funded out of the Drainage Utility Fund.
But the other alternative is trying to get some other funds. That's what we've talked about. That's a very good application to put in because that's a storm drain for runoff off of the mountain, and that's pre-mitigation from fire and some of those other issues. And whether we get it now or later into the future, I think we need to look towards that as well. So
yeah, that certainly ought to be checked out. But I guess my bottom line comment tonight is that we need to get moving on addressing those drainage and access issues because not because of the mountain bike trails, but because of all the uses up there.
Sure. But do we hold the mountain bike hostage for those? Is the other alternative? Do you say that has to be held hostage until those are done?
Hostage.
Well, okay, that's maybe a strong word, but as I think the mayor was kind of pointing out in terms of the Trails Committee thinking that this just keeps getting pushed in the future because we're laying all these things on top of it that are precursors. I'm not seeing it that way because I really think that the planning should be done and consideration should be given to, well, what's enforcement going to look like? Are we shutting it down? There's more than just putting the trail on the hill. So I think that if you were to say, oh, all right, let's say we went 1 year into the future and this time next year we are definitely applying for that grant with the full intention of using it. Do you think it's reasonable that we could accomplish the drainage during that summer with the build at the same time? So when's the grant award on that?
They'll notify you in April, and then the money's available as soon as you sign your contract at the end of May.
So
they give you 2 months to sign your contract.
And then the 2 years runs from the...
And the 2 years from the contract date. So it'd be May of 2021.
So it seems like you could potentially have both activities going at the same time as far as getting the drainage taken care of, but I don't see it. I don't see one pushing the other one out. I would say it's not this year, but you could get both of them done in the same year, right? As far as the build and the phase 1 drainage.
I do have one complexity. I was down writing a letter this very night talking about what we're going to do First South. First South for the next 4 months is not going to be accessible going up and down it. We're going to be putting 2 water lines in. The irrigation company's going to be tearing it up. So First South, even trying to go up and build it, is not going to be very accessible for 4 months.
Sure.
So I would say possibly next year might be a viable thing, but I don't think we're going to build it this year. We haven't got it designed, and I don't think that we're going to have access for 4 months.
Well, that's going to work really great in proving how they're going to access it from the other areas. So you're forcing the issue of what access looks like.
Yeah, we are going to be, yes. Yeah, First South is going to be a disaster because it's going to be built during the winter into the spring, and then So we wouldn't be able to access, our contractor couldn't access it that way, so. But we can't even get it designed in that time. That's my concern is, we've got so many projects we're trying to get designed and up and going right now, so. I think next year would be fine.
But for calendar 2020,
Yeah, well, I
if
think,
we are applying for the grant calendar February 2020 and doing the road build and the drainage, we could get that all done inside the same year. I'm
Yeah.
not hearing anything that says we can't.
yeah, I think you could do it next year. I don't think that'd be a problem. But I think it might be difficult this year with the amount of load we have, trying to watch over all the projects and even get them there. So it's got to have some engineering. We haven't done any engineering yet. And so that would have to be done. It'll take probably 3 or 4 months even to get the engineering done, so. I just don't think we ought to try to push getting it in any faster than we've got strength to do it, so. And time, so. That's my opinion.
I think it's a prudent one.
What?
I think it's a prudent one.
So then, I guess it's staff direction on what we're doing with the grant then.
Yes, we need to make that determination. I think we've laid out all points on the table, so. What does council want to do as far as telling Bruce what to do moving forward?
I'm going to yield to our trails representative.
Pressure's on.
Is this sellable in the form of what we've talked about, or is it just pitchforks and torches after we announce that it's not this year?
Probably only for
I
her.
don't think it's pitchforks and torches. I think they're much more reasonable people than that.
You weren't at the meeting then.
All the more reason to be reasonable now instead of.
My only concern is, yes, I think they're going to be very disappointed. They've put a lot of time into it. And they're really excited and they've got a lot of momentum going. I was 100% and now I'm worried when he says, don't do it. I don't want Corey to come up with or not Corey, but staff or the committees or the whole thing. I don't want him to come up with a problem and not use the money and lose it, because I think we need a trails committee. We need the bike trail. I think we'll get the bike trail. If we can do it in the 2 years, great, but I don't want to I don't want to take it and then have a problem come up. So I'm concerned about what they're going to come up with, because I don't want to mess up the grant. I don't know. I mean, it's hard when I've got staff telling me one thing, because the Trails Committee's worked so hard on it, and they're so excited for it. I think they'll be devastated. But
could you soften it with, say, coming 2020? I mean, they want to know it's coming, right? Yeah. And I don't see that it's not. It's just the timing.
Mm-hmm.
You may have a new Trails Committee to work with next year.
Yeah.
But so much work has already been done. I think we're well on our way. But to jump the cart before the horse, it's a painful issue for me, because I came home with chicks one year and then said, so we need to build a chicken coop, and it went bad quickly. So I'd rather do the planning up front and make sure that we can do a good project and that everyone's going to be happy with it. And I think they will. I think it'll be fabulous.
Well, then I'll make the motion that we direct staff to not proceed with the grant process for 2019, and to encourage Corey and his staff to complete all recommendations by the end of May for the management plan.
Could I suggest another addition that might give the committee a ray of hope, and that is that you direct staff also to make a good faith effort to determine how to fund and construct the drainage and access, deal with the drainage and access issues by next year.
I can do that. I'll add that in. The wording's fine for me. The intent would be is that this is an activity where we would be trying to commence the bike trail, hopefully with grant funds, and the project for appropriate access in calendar 2020.
Well, and I have a
I'll second
question,
that.
because I think the Trails Committee could even come up with the money. So if this all happens, then would we maybe consider letting them come up with the money rather than waiting another year if?
I think it's,
Yes.
we're not
One
gonna have
money.
engineering time available or project time.
Even with that, you're pressed with your road project, yeah.
Were you talking, Robin, about the match money? Or the access and drainage money?
Not the access and drainage
Oh,
money. We
okay.
can't come up with that.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna, yeah.
I don't think we can come up with
That's a
that.
bit much.
So we have a motion, is there a
A
second?
second.
Okay, motion and second. Any further discussion, or can I call for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Sounds like the ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, let's move on to item number 7. This is a staff update on Woods Park, D. Evans drainage issues. We have Kevin Campbell and Randy Randall here to tell us about the study and what has been done there.
You can even bring up that picture on the board. When the subdivision first was built, we required that they put in a subdrain, or not a subdrain, but a storm drain system on the north side and the south side and the east side, so that all the water that came off from their buildings would go into the subdrain, or the storm drain system. When they first built it, Kevin and I were very concerned about the water not being able to get into it. They built and sloped it so the water wasn't running very well into the storm drain system. So they revised that. When it was originally built, though, the drain itself was installed at the right elevation. It was the catch basins that were way too high. The grading was very poor. They came back and made changes. Since that, we went out a few weeks ago and took shots of the basins, looked at the backyards, looked at the attachments from the roof drains. All of the roof drains on the east and north part of the subdivision are draining directly into the storm drain system that flows to the front of the development. One of the things that we have noticed is that that blue pond you see there, that blue pond is very east of the property. It doesn't even come close. So that water is setting there because that is definitely a low spot. D has also built a little berm to try to keep any water from their property going onto his. And we don't see any water lying there, but we do see water east of that. And also there's a building east of the pond that we think a lot of that water's coming off. So from the city's responsibility of trying to provide a development that would maintain most of their property or their water on their property, we believe the development has now probably met that with all the roof drains being put into the storm drain. There's only one building that doesn't have those, and behind that, D has actually built it up a foot to 2 feet behind it, and the dirt's actually on the wall, so there's no way his property can flood onto D's property. So they don't have their drains connected to it, but there's no way because his property is actually built up higher. What's an interesting thing as well, if you look over on Garlick's property, point where Garlick's property to the south is, Kevin, Garlick's have raised their property as well. And so everything east of this, there's no way that any of the water can flow west. In fact, right where Kevin's pointing to, Bill used to own that property all the way down, so that water possibly could have flown west. But even where that lake is, that's kind of a hole on his property. Now, we didn't enter his property to shoot any of his elevations, but you can clearly see that that's a low spot on his property. Now, in the middle, that's built up quite high. Kevin showed just to the north of the pond. Okay, so the pond, north of it. Right there. That area right there has been filled, so it's at least a foot to 2 feet above the pond area. We do have a storm drain out on Lund Lane that the water could flow to if it was graded such that the water could flow to there. But this is such flat area that the water that falls on his property, on his buildings, or on the buildings east of him tries to come westerly, but it can't get there because there are buildings here at this time. So this is very flat. At some point in time, more people are going to have to fill and try to get the water back over to the storm drain ditch along Lund Lane. So I think in conclusion, Kevin's going to talk about some of the design, but basically we believe now they have put it in so that almost all of the water on their property either goes into their storm drain system, remains on the lawn, and then eventually ends up in their detention pond around the front. So from the city's perspective, we think they've built it to a standard that's reasonable, and now we don't feel that the city has any obligation. If they're sprinkling or something onto somebody else's property, we've given them the way to take care of any water on their property. We believe that it's really an issue between each property owner, you know, affecting somebody else's property, because we've provided the means to catch the water and take the water down to the catch basin. Why don't you go ahead, Kevin, and
okay,
go
maybe
to
pull up the record drawing that provided by the developer after they constructed. This one right here. Yeah. Yes.
And then after he gets done looking at those, we want to look at a few pictures that we've taken out there, and we'll show you what we're talking about.
So one thing that Lisa asked us to verify is whether or not the drain system, so again, just to reiterate, this is the Evans property here. It was required of the developer that they install a drain line around the perimeter of the homes that both come down and ultimately get into this detention basin. Also, there's a drain line from this kind of play area that also serves as detention. There's a drain line that ultimately comes down to the frontage road. That drain line is at the depth that it's supposed to be. I will say that at one time these inlets were at the grade that they were designed to be. As some of these homes, especially along this side, as some of these homes came in with their landscaping, some of them did raise those inlets with their landscaping. And that may be why garlics have filled over here. And this area is, again, that's Bill Wright's property. That there's a puddle here, and then again there's a puddle here. This home, lot 15, has a nice swell. In fact, there's a picture.
Yeah, we'll show them the pictures when you get done.
That we can show, but it was verified that the depths of this drain line, it was installed to the proper depth. Again, some of these inlets along here were raised with landscaping when the landscaping was put in. I think, you know, Randy's idea of bringing this out to the front is probably the best idea. At one time we looked at stubbing a pipe out. This is deep enough, but then there would have to be some sort of maybe treatment facility to treat the water before it went through this private system. This is considered a private system that's owned and maintained by the HOA. The city does not own it. It was required by the city for the development to be accepted and approved. But again, as Randy mentioned, the land is very flat. The groundwater depths with the geotechnical study that was done before, in some spots the groundwater was a foot or two below the surface before the subdivision was constructed. So maybe let's go to that picture of lot 15 just to kind of show how lot 15 really has made an effort to keep their own water on their own property.
Okay, that one looking east, you can see the berm just east of the fence that Dee's put there so that none of the water from the lot we're talking about can get onto his property. And there isn't any water sitting between the fence and his berm. So the water, and the west of it is actually lower than this berm, we know that. So the water would have to stay on their property rather than getting on Dee's. That's the swell they built right there.
This is the inlet box at the east of the backyard of lot 15, just west of the berm.
And as Kevin was saying, see that patio? The dirt was up to that at one point. And Kevin and I talked to them, and they lowered it down and created a swell.
Yeah, this is a decent little swell along here, and their roof drains are tied into this line. It was verified by Randy that, and so you may be getting some, maybe some irrigation sprinkler water, although the dirt is fairly tight up against the bottom of that fence. So we don't think that there's much, if any, water getting from lot 15 to the east. Maybe go to the next picture. It shows the swell a little bit.
That's the one.
Okay.
I think that's the one north. That's north of that lot.
This is where this is where the fill is kind of pressing up against the fence. The area that was filled. So
and
maybe
that's
go to the next picture.
That's where they don't have it tied into the swell, but he's filled behind it. You can see the berms behind it, so there's no.
This is the pond east of lot 15. This is the main area that does not drain currently. Maybe go to the next picture.
That's the last one there.
Oh, that is? Okay.
So could you go back to the photo for just a second?
Yeah.
I mean, just taking a look at it, it looks like it's not only a low spot, but it's ringed by earth all around it.
It is.
Okay.
It is. There's no question. But there's a big building east of this that would generate a lot of runoff because it's not it's impervious. The building is, and it's probably 2,000 square feet. So all of that water could run off of that building and run onto his property. And he has a building as well that has impervious roofs. So we question whether any water or very little water is coming from Woods Park. They have very much the capability of handling all of the water. And pretty much it looks pretty good. I've walked all of the backyards with the permission of all the property owners, and they look pretty reasonable as far as containing their own water on their own site, unless they're sprinkling over the fence. And we don't know that that's the case, so.
Yeah, these pictures were taken during non-irrigation season, and the puddle is there. I think in order, these inlets and this drainage system along here, the drain line is definitely deep enough if there was a line that was stubbed in here, or if this berm was breached, this water could get to that drain line. But we've talked about that. We don't know if that's the best solution to be, that is one solution, but I don't know if it's absolutely the best solution to get that, take that puddle away, But
in order to do that, you're saying that the HOA would have to agree to tie in?
Yes, and the problem with it is you have two different kind of uses. You've got a farm use. You may have manure or other types of things that may be flowing through their system that may come up through the system. Our suggestion, if there were anything to be done, it ought to be piped to the ditch and then have a treatment facility so that any pollutants that are ending up in the ditch are taken care of, settle out or whatever.
To Lund Lane.
Yes, to Lund Lane. The ditch at Lund Lane is deep enough as well. So there are alternatives to solve the problem, but there's no way that water will run north because now he's built it up high enough that it can't go west and it may go a little bit south, but it's too low to go south, and it can't go north because it's too low right there. You could do a topographic of the entire property to see the undulations in the property, so.
You'd have to pipe it to get it to Lund Lane.
Yes, you'd have to pipe it.
Put an inlet box, yeah.
Yep.
More questions for him? So this is an issue that earlier in the night, Mr. Evans came up to the front and brought this up. Now, I want everyone here to recognize one very important thing. That a couple of months ago, this was brought up, and we listened to people's concerns. We spent money going back. I have a document here, a public document, to show what we have done. The city has spent money. We paid for an outside consultant. We're trying to make this right, okay? And so I would hope that we can respond to the problems that we are focusing on right now. We don't need a lot of history. I'm about solutions and finding problems and solutions. So I'm hoping that as we talk it over, that we can talk about solutions and find solutions. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so with that said, I'd love to hear from the residents as well too, and they can answer your questions. And let's try and find solutions to this, okay? So whoever would like to come up, you're welcome to. Just say your name and where you're from, that'd be great.
My name is Bill Wright, and I live in 415 West Lund Lane, and I'm right next to Dee's property, and I'm right next to Garlick's property. We've been talking about this issue for 4 years with Mayor Cutler and the other city council before. I'm tired of talking about it.
We are too, that's why we're looking for solutions.
Took pictures the other day when we had that big rainstorm. We had bigger than the pond in all 3 properties. And that's the way it's been. And normally when we get a wetter year down here with a lot of snow and stuff, then we have the issue with the ponds too. My garden's under 6 inches of water normally. And I don't know when Oakwood, I met with Kevin September, I think it was, and we looked at the backyards. The drains don't drain anything. And I took pictures a couple years ago when we had the floods. The only drain that drained any water out to the pond by the Lund Lane, or not Lund Lane, by the frontage road, was the main drain that drains the drains in the driveway in Woods Park. The other 2 drains hardly drained anything. There was leaves in the pipe. The leaves were still there. And the drains are too high for my property. I've been there 32 years, and we never had the issue.
I appreciate what you're saying and what they've reported to us. Do you have questions about what they've reported?
Because the drains...
Let's go get to those, and that'd be great.
The drains were not tied into this drain, this blue pipe drain. The outside of the houses, there's a drain. Yes.
Randy, you need to come, Randy, come up here and respond to him.
Yeah, everything, where's the pointer?
Go to the first, probably to the first.
Every house along here is tied in except for one. But he can't, his water can't come to the east because there's so much dirt here. And whether it's tied in or not, it's still not the city's responsibility. That's between the property owners, whether they tie in or don't tie in. Yeah. I went to all these homes here, all of these 5 homes except for this one are tied in with their storm drain system off of their roofs. There's not any roof water that doesn't. Now these over here, I would say, Bill, which could possibly affect yours, is a possibility. But where did your water go before? You used to own this land, correct?
That's correct.
You sold this land to them.
Yes.
And did your water flow down through here in the past? Did you used to have water in your basement? Do you have a subdrain system in your basement?
I have pumps in the outside of the house.
And how long have those pumps been there, Bill?
Well, we had surface water before, but we didn't have the flooding in the basement like we have now. Because everything that runs off of Woods Park runs into my property, Dee's property, and Garlick's property.
Well, we've been up there many times and we've not seen any water running off of here. And I've never seen any water running back that direction, but I'm not there all the time either.
Well, Siemens have sold the house now on that last house closest to my property. Right, and that was not tied into the drains, and I don't think
You're talking about the roof drains?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And we have not required them to tie in. That's not been our requirement. The developer decided to tie these in to make sure D was taken care of. The city has not required those to be tied in.
Okay, well, why am I getting all the water to run off the roofs into my property and our other 2 properties? That's not my responsibility either, to take care of the water.
No, we don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
But we don't think as a city, we have a lot of people in the city that claim that their neighbors are putting water onto them. Even up on the high east benches, people do. The city can only do certain things. We've provided the storm drain system for them to do that. And so for us to go in and enforce, it's hard for the city to enforce people to do things against their will. The developer did tie in the ones that we asked them to tie in. I'm talking about they took care of regrading this and making it work better. And
So
and what Dee did here proved that the water wasn't coming off of this home, was not going east, because his berm's higher, and there's no way the water can come off here. I mean, that's one of the things you could do here, Bill. We could put dirt here so the water can come out. But I think the mayor brought up a great point. The solution, in my opinion, is to run a sub-drain or a storm drain system from here over to here so that the water truly could get out to a point where it would flow away. The gradient of the soil is actually going this direction. It's kind of southwest. So you'd have to put in a drain that actually would go back to the creek here. I would be concerned about tying into their storm drain with your water off of your
Storm drain is too high. It's higher than my property.
Well, we've shot this one here is not. We could shoot this one and see. We didn't shoot any of these. We were only asked to look at these at this time, but we'd be glad to shoot yours as well. But there again, we're trying to keep the water from their property getting onto your property. We never did provide for water on your property, trying to get rid of it. That was never the intent.
Well, I didn't have the water before the subdivision. And yes, I sold a half acre to the subdivision.
Yeah.
But I was never talked to by the city about my property being lower after they raised the property up a foot above the frontage road.
You know, I think another thing you could do, which would cost a lot of money, is do a topographic map so that you could see, just like we said, this being a low point is very easily seen because that pond is quite a ways from the property lines here. And even builds some of it, does it not pond a little bit east of this line right here?
Well, most of it's over top the garden, right by the fences.
Which is where? Isn't that
Right.
higher up here?
Mhm.
Or is it right there?
Right there.
Okay.
That's where our major water is. Dee's property, my property, and Garlick's property.
Well, Garlics has raised all their property here, haven't they?
And they still get a pond, a big pond there too.
Yeah. So nothing can get by us. So Garlics just recently have raised this property up,
Well,
fairly recently, in 4 years. Within 4 years, they've raised their property as well. So really, everybody has blocked any water that could, in the past, maybe run off onto somebody else's property. So, you know, when you built your home, you added more surface runoff, more driveways and so forth. So that's not natural flow, but I truly believe that the solution is to add a storm drain from here all the way over to here, long-term, short-term, so you can get rid of the water off the back of the property. So
Okay.
that's basically what we have found, and we think the solution is to put a storm drain in, if that's what they want to do, or regrade the properties so they can go to Lund Lane. Or not, yeah, Lund Lane.
What do you think?
Go ahead.
Another idea that could maybe be briefly studied to see if a few shots could be taken to see if it would work is, I think that the Garlicks have a pump that they pump up to a drain line that drains down to this basin on Frontage Road as well. It'd be interesting to see if there could maybe be a system, if there was an easement granted from the Garlicks to go due west, because Randy's right that the grades, the best way to pick up grade is really to go due west. Or if an agreement could be reached that, you know, these drain lines are deeper than what they appear from the grates that are there. I think that this drain line, well, I know that this is deeper than this pond. So it'd be interesting to see if, and maybe the water could be treated with a inexpensive snout or some sort of treatment facility that would treat the water before it entered into their private drain system, but there would need to be an agreement there between. So Randy's solution is the simplest in that you're just dealing with the city and you're just discharging into a city system. The other solutions, you have to either go through the Garlicks or go through the Woods PDO folks and work with them. But those are the three solutions, I think.
So that would be my solution?
No, I think we're just talking about, we're not saying whose solutions they are right now. I think we're just saying that those are.
We're coming up with
options.
ideas and solutions to the problem with their expertise as being the professionals and knowing the city. We're trying here, Mr. Hanson, we're trying. Okay? Oh, it's Mr. Evans, I'm sorry. That's what we got to come with solutions, and that's why we're having a discussion here. So is this answering your question that you have, Bill? Are you seeing some use there? I mean, obviously, whatever solution we come up with, we got to get a bid, we got to figure out what the cost is. I mean, I don't know how Oakwood Homes quite figures into this as well too, but there's different parties involved here, so.
I understand that. And I had Dave Walker come out last year when we had issues with we had another big rainstorm and we had water, because we have the ditch that goes past our property on Lund Lane. And they came and dug that out because we were getting a lot of water runoff on our property when a heavy rains comes, and it would flood Dee's property, my property too, from the other road, from Lund. So they dug that deeper. So that would be one thing I can see with Kevin, to run all the way across Dee's property to there. But I don't want to affect Dee in any way. We're good friends. But we had the issue with that. And all that surface water, you're talking about the park, all those new houses, everything else comes down that drain by our home and floods over top of our driveway and everything. That's just another issue that's going on. And Farmington Ivory wanted to tie into there, and then they changed their mind and moved it to Farmington, the runoff water from that new subdivision of Ivory's. But we still get high water coming down there from the park, all those homes. Everything drains into that drain.
Which park?
Freedom Park.
Freedom Hills Park. So that's kind of a separate drainage issue out on Lund Lane. If the ditch, it's kind of more of a keeping that pipe clean and that ditch dredged so that
right, because we had it just recently. It covered about 50 foot of my property with flood water.
The problem with that pipe he's talking about, it's undersized. When it was installed, it was not large enough. At some point in time, has to be enlarged is the problem.
Which pipe, Randy?
The pipe for his driveway.
Oh.
His driveway's out on Lund Lane, and the pipe is undersized. We have larger pipes above, we have larger pipes below. Both D's and Bill's pipes are undersized for the ditch. At some point in time, when the frontage is fixed, it'll all have to be enlarged at some point in time, yes. Bill's exactly right. Which we'll probably end up having to do, or the people who front on it will end up putting the pipe in, not the city. So that's a question as to who has to pay for that. That's a question for Lisa. Is it their responsibility or is it the city's responsibility now or into the future? So that's a totally different subject.
Who put the undersized pipes in? Did we or did they?
They did. They did, or those who owned the property before them put the pipes in, so.
Randy, I thought that Lund Lane was there on the left of this photo. Am I?
Lund Lane's over here.
Okay, that's what I thought. So, Mr. Wright, is your property, I'm not understanding where
Bill's property's right there, east of that strip.
But his driveway comes out to here. It's kind of a long.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's what I wasn't seeing. All right.
Yeah.
My driveway's 1,000 foot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And where
That makes a lot more
Bill
sense.
lives is another impediment of water. His water can't go south because there's a major road that goes east and west. When they built the freeway back in the 70s, that's where they hauled the dirt down. So the water can't keep going south. So there's a road on Lund Lane and there's a road south of Bill's house. So that's kind of what's pocketing and keeping the water. He's kind of in a low spot right there. So the topographics have changed, there's no question, since this whole development was put in. So the question I would ask, is it the water going east or is it being impeded from coming west? Because that whole road is hard surfaced and the road to the south is hard surfaced and you have more buildings that are hard surfaced. So we do have more water that's being generated because there's more hard surfacing. Right. So that's an added amount as well.
Is there going to be any effect on any of this with what's happening across the street with Ivory Homes and their development over there? Will that not affect this at all?
All of their drainage, as Bill mentioned, is going to the north into Farmington. They're rebuilding half of Lund Lane. The hard surface on Centerville City side will not change or be affected. We might rebuild 5 to 10 feet of the road with Farmington City, but the hard surface amount will not increase on Lund Lane on Centerville City side. So the answer is no. Yeah.
But we're not guaranteeing what Farmington's doing on their side, how well their inlets will pick up. One of the problems, D is west of that project. And so he could be affected with his home in Farmington. Because he's directly west of it, living in Farmington. So that curb and gutter, for example, if they put in inlets and the inlets don't pick the water up, that could affect him on that side. Because he doesn't have any curb and gutter in front of his home. So he could be at risk there on the other side with his home. So, which is not our responsibility. That's going to be Farmington's responsibility to make sure that that's handled on the other side.
That's challenging, Dee, living on a border, isn't it? Having to deal with two cities.
I got the Bamber, it's a natural dam, just like Oakwood subdivision.
Yeah. So what's some recommendations we have coming out? Is there any further questions for Randy and Kevin?
Just one question. Did Oakwood get their bond money back? So they've completed all their stuff?
I would recommend that we go out and take shots at the low spot of your property. We take the shot at the low spot of Dee's property as well. And then take a shot on the flow line of these pipes, as well as a flow line of the pipes out at Lund Lane, to see, what of those three options is realistic. Again, I would suggest we shoot the flow line of this system that runs along between it's on Woods PDO, but it's along the Garlic's property line. Shoot the flow line of this system, and then find the low spot in here, and find the low spot in this pond, and then shoot this system, and see what the realistic options are for getting the water out of there.
Okay.
And then go from there. And we can prepare some simple cost estimates of what the three options would cost, so that, again, I'm not saying who would pay for it, but at least the numbers would be there that you'd know.
There's one fallacy about this whole thing, and that is that the pond can hold water. The flow line may be at one elevation, but if the pond ever fills, then the water can back up. So that would be a question as well. How far are they from the flood rim down at the bottom? This elevation, this pipe, I'm almost certain that's going to be deep enough, that's deep enough. Even this is deep enough. But your water can go back the other direction if your land actually here is lower than here. I'm talking flood level. I'm not talking day-to-day work.
When the ditch is full, you're saying?
Yes, the floods of '83, this whole piece of property was underwater in the floods of '83 because this was lower than the ditch. Water came out of the ditch and flooded it. So I'm telling you, the long-term solution is to create a levee or the land high enough by him filling this. That's what really needs to happen long-term. All these properties here, all the way up to the Bamberger, need to be raised a foot or two and sloped so that they're protected against even backwater backing up onto their property at some point in time. 99% of the time, that's going to be low enough. This is going to be low enough. But as the water fills up in the pond, it's actually going to back up. It could back up onto the property. So eventually they may have to raise this a foot or two. But in '83, the water was all the way to the top of the street in 1983. So, but I think short term, a pipe could be put in. The question of it is, who should pay for that pipe would be the question. And that's a question for Lisa. She's got all the answers. She told me yesterday she did.
Well, hold on to that question, because I know Mr. Evans wants to speak.
Sure.
I definitely want to come back to that issue.
So the question was asked and Kevin didn't answer it, and I'm interested in the answer. Has the Oakwood been given their bonding money back?
No, they have not. This is an item that's on their punch list. Again, Lisa might have to answer whether or not, if we're taken to task on it, we can
You can only
withhold their
use
money
bond
before-
funds for
yeah.
the proportions of the public infrastructure that you got the security for. So for instance, if you get a bond for the public street, you can only hold it for the public street. You can't
Can't
extract
hold
it
it
from.
because they did the construction
Exactly.
wrong and it's flooding.
So if this wasn't a public improvement, now, we've said with the driveways and perhaps there's some drainage points, but it's not going to address infrastructure on a neighboring property, no.
At one
Nor
time-
could we hold it hostage because of these issues.
At one time, Oakwood agreed to stub this pipe out into this low-lying area. But I don't know if D might not have wanted them on his property. That was an idea at one time. So I do think Oakwood is willing to explore options. They have drainage issues in this park area that they have to resolve before they can get out of warranty. So it is something that's been discussed with Oakwood. They have made improvements, as Randy alluded to, that they have tied in some of the roof drains. They've had this property owner here build this swell to keep his own irrigation runoff on his own property. I think Oakwood would be willing to stub a pipe out into there, but again, there'd have to be an agreement with the HOA and an agreement to go onto the property. Maybe there'd have to be two separate agreements with each property owner, but Oakwood is willing to try to help in some ways. But the answer is no, we haven't ended the warranty.
But it probably doesn't help the situation.
I don't think we could, once they get their amended plat recorded, that's kind of the last thing and the drainage issue at the park. We probably would have to release it. Lisa and I could argue about that, but yeah.
And so would solutions be the responsibility of, in your guess, the responsibility of the HOA and homeowners, or would it be the responsibility of the developer? To the extent that it is attributable to the development. And I understand I'm asking for an opinion, but.
Okay, yeah.
They have sold all of the development, so the homeowners association has taken over from the developer. So anything the developer wants to do and contribute to, they would have to, if it involves the infrastructure inside the subdivision, it would have to be negotiated with the HOA.
For the agreements?
Yeah, for the agreements.
And Steve, I don't want what I'm about to say to be offensive, but past experience, because of the change that we did on drainage fees and so forth 2 years ago, we don't have a good track record of HOAs and drainage and maintaining those systems, correct?
Correct.
That's what a substantial amount of the increase was that we did 2 years ago.
No, the increase 2 years ago was to replace drainage pipes.
Which the HOAs were originally supposed to be maintaining.
That was different. Those were sub-drain systems that were in the street that didn't, our greatest problem is the sub-drains in the streets where they only had one fee, they didn't pay or do anything to them. This being a total private unit development where lawns and some of those things are taken care of jointly. We've found great success in maintenance where you have more than one issue. But where we, for example, just south of this project, we had several properties that only had a subdrain. The streets were owned by the city. All the land was owned privately. And those did not collect enough money, and they went out the door.
But that was the reason for creating the subdrain fee many years ago, not
Yes.
2 years ago.
Yes.
2 years ago was...
2 years ago, we increased it substantially because we were
Correct.
behind.
So
Or at least that's my recollection of the basics of the discussion.
Well, I don't think there's the connection, though, that you're trying to make.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
Then I'm
the
wrong.
connection, I wouldn't see that either.
Okay, then I'm wrong. I just was, that's where my mind had gone.
Okay, well, thank you, but we've been talking about this for years now.
Thank you, Bill, for
The
being
same
here, and
problem.
thank you for just asking those questions and getting the answers from them. And
Thank you.
yeah, Evans, did you have any comments?
Yes, we both do. My name is Trish Evans, and I am Dee's wife. We own the farm property on the east of this subdivision. First of all, where they've got it labeled a pond, that is not a pond. That is a pasture where we have grazed cattle for years and years and years. That was never meant to be a pond, and all of that area where they're labeling it a pond, we don't have pasture grass there anymore. It's killed it. It's killed the root system. We built a berm. We went to the expense and the time and the effort to build a berm to protect our property and to protect Bill Wright's property. When we protested this subdivision in the very, very beginning, when they were first talking about it, this was our concern, because we knew when they raised that land that we would get flooded and that there would be problems. And they assured us that this would not happen, that they had to be responsible for their own water, and they're not. And the house, the fifth one up next to the road where it stubs into our property, they would water for 4 and 5 hours at a time, and that water would run right under that fence and right onto our property. That's why we had to build the berm. That was one of the reasons. We shouldn't have to go to the expense to take their water that's coming onto our property. We shouldn't have to bear that expense to remove it from our property. So if you guys want to run a drain or whatever you want to do, we can't afford the cost of removing that subdivision's water off of our property. That's a burden that we cannot afford. And we were assured that this would not be happening. So we are very, very, very upset, because this has been going on for years, and it has cost a substantial amount of money to buy extra hay to feed our animals that would naturally graze on that land if we didn't have it underwater all the time.
So, thank you, and I appreciate what you're saying. That's what we're trying to do with Oakwood, with the city, with you guys, determine what the solution is, and then who's responsible to fix that. We've said, well, that's where our city attorney will help us there. So is that a pond, or is that grazing land, or what is it?
Grazing land.
That is grazing land.
Well, actually, that pond exists today. And
There it doesn't.
yeah, right there, it does. I was there today and looked at it. That pond, I got a picture of it. There is water that's sitting right there today, and it's not coming from here, because your berm has stopped it from coming there.
Well, we've recently had some moisture. Yeah,
Yes,
we
we
do get some water on our property from the natural rain and snow.
You do.
But the biggest majority of the problem has been the runoff from that subdivision, because we have got pictures and we have documented it. And we've even called the police because we couldn't get the water to stop. And I'm pretty sure that's documented too. So something needs to happen, but for us to have to bear the cost of removing this subdivision's water, that isn't fair.
So, can you wait just a second? Who is the "they" that promised you this wasn't a problem?
Mayor.
Well, we came to the city council meeting at the very, very get-go. We have protested this and protested this and protested this. And Corey knows that we have.
Provide some clarity to it, so the history to it.
Well, I'm trying to understand, and
Yeah.
I mean, when you say...
The Evans did participate into it, and they were worried indeed about the stormwater issues. And I was part of that discussion, saying this development's required to build the infrastructure to handle their water. And I think that's the point, you're seeing the conflict. They're still assuming that this development is providing water to them. Tonight, the presentation is the infrastructure was built to manage their own water. So that's the conflict.
And Randy and Kevin are saying the water is not going east.
It's not coming from this development, or if it is, the sprinklers, it's coming in minor amounts.
Okay,
And so
the water,
so
maybe they've contained it now, But it hasn't been.
I understand, during development, a lot of things happen, and I don't want to say that there wasn't water runoff and so forth. But as we're closing out the subdivision, and that's what I said at the last meeting, there's been a dispute on where the water's coming from. Because I've been privy to all the discussions in the past. The check is that this development is not producing a significant amount of water from the development.
And it's especially not right now.
So
We're only talking when sprinklers are running, right?
Is there's past issues, recognize the past issues. The developer's now built to a point and given us the drawings that the system is now functioning. That doesn't guarantee into the future that there might not be a problem with the drainage and the homeowners associations got to clean it and all of those other things. But to date, the system is built, substantial amount of water has been taken care of. That was the concern discussed historically at the approval of this subdivision. Now the conflict is occurring is, where is the water coming from? And what I'm hearing in the discussions of Kevin and Randy, because I am the target of this, I realize, but it's not me. You know, I'm the face of it. But
You made all the money, didn't you? Come on, Corey, just fess up.
I didn't make all the money that
I know.
Mr. Prince did when he sold the project. But now the issue is where's the water coming from? Most of the water is coming from their own property or properties to the east. Whether it's inadequate for the Lund Lane on a storm water management, whether it's Mr. Wright's water can't go out south because of the Old Hall Road. But the water that they're experiencing, it's not a pond, it's a pasture, but because they have low spots, all of that eastern water is collecting in those low spots for the
The water's not coming from the east because we don't have streams of water coming from the east like we do from the west.
I can't solve what their concerns are. I can only say this is what the expert's saying. If I've said something that's errant, let me know. But my understanding is the solution is how to deal with their own water and the water that's spilling off from other areas that are not part of this development.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, I do think that more of the water that may have overland flowed east to west, Randy alluded to this, but some of the water that may have flown from east to west is now
no longer
It's being trapped. And so they may be seeing more water even if it's not from the development because there's somewhat of a dam there. So you know, this obviously has been raised, the Garlick's property has been raised, and so some water that used to potentially flow east to west, again, may be trapped. It might not necessarily be, especially in the non-irrigation season, might not be coming from the new development, but it might just be getting trapped in there more than it used to. But
Well, in Higley, I think it's important to notice that Higley built a house, or not a house, but a roof larger than Bill's house right here. There's a huge building that sits right here, about 10 feet east of his property, which is hard surfaced, which that's the direction it's gonna flow.
Jake, can you pull up?
But you look at the land around that and it's dry around that.
Google Maps so we can see that.
In the summertime, it's dry.
Yeah.
The east side of our property's dry in the summertime.
You could calculate how much runoff comes off that building. You'd find out that buildings are very substantial in the amount of runoff that they have.
My husband wants you to look at picture 22 that he enclosed in that packet that he sent to
Right
you.
here's the building I'm telling you about right there. See how large that roof is? That pond, where the low spot is right there. In fact, you can see it on this drawing right here, even before it was built. There's a low spot in the water, and I think a lot of that water is coming from here. There's a lot of water off of Bill's Road that comes back here that's impervious, that runs down here. And I think Kevin's exactly right. There may have been some that ran through here, but this is not natural, this is not natural, this is not natural, and this is not natural. Those are impervious areas that add to the runoff.
Maybe zoom in on that dark spot that's kind of a tree, right? And so
Yeah, the dark spot's a tree.
the pond
Exactly.
the pond is just kind of west of the tree. So
There's not a wet spot there. That is a tree.
That's a tree.
yeah,
That's a
I
great big
understand. I
globe
understand
willow.
it's a tree. I understand. I'm saying right now the pond is about here.
Yeah, that's exactly where it is, and it's not supposed to be a pond.
What I guess I'm getting at is that some of this bare land may not have drained perfectly before, but I do believe that there's more water being trapped now than there probably was before. I don't think that you could dispute that because of the contours of the land.
Well,
From
all
east
I
to
know is
west.
we never had this problem before this subdivision, and that's why we protested it. And when the city stood up and said that that would not happen to us, it has. And so now who bears the cost to fix it? And for you guys to say, let's put a great big drain in the middle of your pasture, that isn't okay. We don't want a big old drain in the middle of our pasture. That is our pasture. That's where we graze our animals.
I want to go here. Can we pull up that subdivision slide again? The picture one where he's showing houses.
Yeah, we pull that back up
Sorry.
here.
My name's D. Evans. That was my wife.
Let's see,
We
which one was
own the
that?
551 West property. A lot of the problem didn't start all this. It started over here when Rainy Homes got put in. All the drainage from up in Rainy Homes comes down. You say our, what do you call it, pipe under our driveway is too small? It was not too small until Rainy Homes. You've got how many homes up there and how many square feet of asphalt feed right into that ditch? From Farmington, Rainy Homes comes into this ditch right here. This now is 4 foot, 3 foot, 3 foot cement up to, see this nice Jersey barrier right out my driveway? They moved the ditch over 6 feet. Okay, I know for a fact this house just this summer, they moved their drain from their roof runoff and tied it into their, that little circle right there is their subdrain. If picture number 22, I think it is, this house right here, Jesse. This new fill area, I've owned this for over 20 years. I've never filled it in. That's been a garden the whole time. From this corner, drains down my driveway. That much I can prove and guarantee. So what we're talking about back here where this pond he says is, it's not, it's right here. When were those pictures taken with snow, Randy, today?
No, I have some pictures today with snow.
Was that the ones you showed?
No.
Okay.
I showed today's, no. That's just drawn in there, but it's east, it's farther east than their property line. It shows that it's low on your property. It's not low on their property, it's low on your property.
The problem we were having is I can't get a tractor. I've got a little 720 John Deere. I come out here and I clean this. I fertilize it, put weed killer down. I haven't been able to get my tractor out there since 2015 because of the subdivision. Because this guy here, this idiot, waters constantly. We were out planting a garden this spring, and his water was on for 2 hours before I called the police. This female police officer, I've got her name written at home, came, and while she was there, this right here, water kicked on again, and it was already running all over the place.
I appreciate what you're saying, but are we finding a solution here? Because we want to find a solution. We want to help you. We want to find a solution. We recommended the city will go back and come up with some solutions. We may be responsible. You may. The homeowners might, or the Oakwood homes. But I appreciate the difficulty you're going through. But we want to find a solution.
Okay, well, if you look at
is what
picture
we're looking
14,
at.
Randy takes pictures of stuff up against the vinyl fence. This is a picture looking at the vinyl fence. I let Oakwood Homes come on my property and bring curb gutter and asphalt to fence line so that any future development wouldn't have to go back in 20 feet. Do you remember that meeting, Randy?
I do.
Okay. I let them do that. on the stipulation that they were going to replace the grass, a picture right there, there's no grass, they've never planted it. All I've gotten was they washed out cement truck on our property. I built this berm just to prove the fact that the water is not coming. You know, yeah, when it rains, it hits hard surfaces, whatever. But the property to the east of me, Corey has said that Centerville's, if the rain falls on your land, it stays on your land and you take care of it. Right, Corey? He won't answer. He's asleep. Picture number 22 shows you the building, how dry it is, and then the berm that's full of water. Every 2 days during the summer, that berm, I get 8 to 10 inches of water from them watering. And that's been my thing. I went over and knocked on their door. They will not answer their door until I call the police. They answer the door when the police get there. But there's pictures that I've provided to you. I don't know who has the copies of them. I built this berm with my own money to prove where the water's coming from. I have a video of the water dripping off the vinyl fence and going into it, going into my property. They say the drains, if you put in a drain and it has a shadow around it, it ain't below grass level. This drain is in the second house up. This house right here. And that drain is right there where that arrow is. Their bubbler, her bubbler to her house is 18 inches off my fence. His was 18 inches as of spring of this year that he finally, his dad-in-law came and dug it up for him. So for them to say that it's not coming from them, these pictures should be more than enough proof to you guys that it is coming from Oakwood Homes. And I have these pictures. Here's a nice one. There's Randy standing there years ago. We got a big pile right there and the gate pushed out. That's because the city snowplow comes out and they push it up against that gate. The deal was, when I let them use that, was that I have access to my property through that gate. That's the only reason I let them take down the fence. I wish I never would have. I have a longhorn steer that we talked about, 5 foot 6 inch horns. Her horn goes right through that fence. Look at the white little graded panels, because the distance from post to vinyl fence is 18 inches on one side and it's 21 inches on the other side, with the posts sticking out from the thing that these farm gates hook onto. I don't know what Centerville's attitude in separation of subdivision and agricultural. Farmington is, it has to have a non-climb chain link fence to protect from animals. I get kids walking right through it. This home right here, I wish you guys would inspect where this trampoline's at. I don't know what city lets somebody use a vinyl fence and put 18 inches of fill above ground level using the fence as a retention wall. Go out there and measure it. You'll be surprised.
So I have a question, Randy, Lisa, whoever wants to take this one, or it's probably a combination of both of you. Not understanding water law, the layman's viewpoint would be is that if you've been enjoying free drainage on a parcel that doesn't belong to you, and that parcel sells, what is the obligation for the new parcel owner to provide you drainage? I'm not saying that's what it is, I'm just asking that as a theoretical.
The
Lisa can answer that, right?
The general law is that you have to allow for the natural drainage course of water. So if you come in and there's a stream that comes through your property and you build it up, you still have to allow the stream to come through. But that's where I think we disagree with the Evans of the natural drainage course. This is not you know, I think as we've heard, a lot of their property is the low point. There's some pre-existing conditions. As this subdivision went in, their responsibility was to take care of their own water as well as handling natural drainage. My recollection is that we had an entire study allowing the creek, there's some creek flow, and Kevin, you can help me, but I think it's Pine Creek that comes down there, and this developer was required to install a larger drainage ditch down the road so that it could accommodate all of that natural drainage course. So in my opinion, we did handle the natural drainage course in the development of this property, as well as ensuring that the property owner retained all of its own water on its property with the substantial detention facility along the frontage road. So that's basically the law. The main case is a University of Utah case where the University of Utah built a huge parking lot and did not accommodate the water flow, and then it backed up onto the neighboring property, and the courts were saying, well, you should have understood that that was the natural drainage course. But in my opinion, we're not necessarily dealing with the natural drainage course here, because the neighbors, even without this property, had some low spots on their property. There's very little fall on any of these properties. So, and second of all, the point I wanted to make, which is very easy, the city is not responsible for someone's sprinkler. We can go and enforce and say, you're wasting water. We do have some ordinances to assist with enforcing someone overwatering, but the city is not part of that solution if that water creates any damage to the neighboring property owner. In my opinion, that is a private matter between the two property owners. So we can be involved in enforcing wasting water types of facilities. The other thing that I was concerned about was making sure that, number one, you know, this was designed to handle the water for the project and get it out not only to the frontage road, but further beyond, so that it was drained, but also that it was built to the specifications that it was designed to. And that's what Kevin has looked at and has said, yes, it was built to the specifications for the project, which in my mind also takes the city out of the obligation of a fix. We do regulate as part of the subdivision process, but making sure that that has been taken care of as part of the process. And I'm not seeing any argument here that there was any error in the design of the subdivision. And the evidence from our experts is that this subdivision is handling its own water. Yes, there's some problems. If the city wants to be part of that solution, it's at your option. You're the policymakers. But I don't see necessarily a legal obligation. Right, I'm saying if they want to participate, because I think Oakwood Homes is also coming to the table and saying, you know, we're willing to be part of the solution, but I think everybody has to come to that table or it's not going to work.
So let me maybe clarify one thing in that. One thing that did happen, and it's been verified out in the field, is after the developer gave us these record drawings of where these inlet boxes are at, they got C of O. Some of those inlet boxes were raised. The pipe is still where it was supposed to be, but we don't go back out after these people landscape. So to Dee's point of these 18 inches of dirt being up against that fence, I don't doubt that. Because what happens after we give C of O, after we accept the record drawings, all that landscaper has to do is go out there and raise that little inlet up and grade around it and then grade up against the fence. And so, again, I don't doubt that maybe some of this water came across that land before that development was built. And these inlet boxes were designed so that that overland flow could continue. But when the final landscape happens, some of those grades raise. People raise their own yards, and it's after C of O. That's a tricky situation, you know, that we don't go out and regulate people's landscaping 6 months after they got C of O. Did they raise their yard 2 feet or 1.5 feet? We don't usually regulate that, so it is a tricky situation.
Sounds like, do we have an enforcement mechanism after the certificate of occupancy?
That's a good question to ask, because The point was, the subdivision didn't have any approved drawings as far as how the grade had to be on the project. The inlets, not the inlets, but the pipe itself had a grade, flow, elevation, what was required. But the rest of the fill on the property is not being regulated on this. On some subdivisions, we require them to give us the grading up on the foothills because of elevation of fall or elevation to the building. We require a topographic map showing how they're going to retain the slopes. This one did not have any requirements for Kevin to come in and look at all the grades in order to approve the grading plan. So we went and looked afterwards to see if it's reasonable enough to collect the water. That was the concern. It was water collection, not necessarily did they have retaining walls or something like that. That was not a requirement for us to do that.
These homeowners on about the property, are they on irrigation water? And
they are. They're on Weber Basin.
So Weber Basin's got the enforcement responsibility of
yes.
not our police department?
Yes. Well, even the police department doesn't. If I issue a citation for somebody for overwatering, it ends up coming back to you guys. That's how direct it is. So we issue a citation, and then they have to come talk to you guys if we issue a citation. It's really not good from the standpoint of not being regulated and taken care of. They can appeal it to you guys. So we don't regulate anybody sprinkling on anybody's property. That's between the two people. It's not.
You can't.
The city can't get involved with those kind of things.
So I take it we were going back and you're giving us some idea of that drain pipe, or, I mean, and how, is that where we're at on this?
Yeah, those are the two, there are solutions. Yeah, there's three solutions. Yeah, two or three solutions. One, you could run a pipe from here all the way over to here, and just get permission to run a pipe from here to here, or a pipe from here to here, and allow the water to go through here. If they were to do that, I'm sure that these people down here would ask them to participate in the maintenance and make sure that the water that comes through their property is clean and pure. You know, what's interesting is the EPA is getting really tough on water nowadays. In fact, they're trying to make us detain water on our everybody's piece of property. And it's not going to be very easy and reasonable to do some of those kind of things. It's hard, especially in lands that have differential, to try to keep all the water on that property, to stay on that property. But
so with
what's the gutter for?
Huh?
What's the gutter for?
Well, they want water quality is the issue. They want the water, and that's why I'm saying from this, to allow any type of pollutions to come from one piece of property, that's what we deal with, is the pollutions that come from the streets, that come from agriculture, that come from different types of industry. We are really getting pushed to make sure that the water from the streets. The street sweeping we do 4 times a year is for the purpose of cleaning the streets so it doesn't end up in the Great Salt Lake. We are really getting pushed from the EPA on those types of things.
So from the HOA's perspective, what would be their incentive to have any tie-in? It's going to increase their risk, and
that's exactly that's.
And I'm not speaking on behalf of them. I'm just
right,
like, well, why would you want to take on this risk or additional burden to your system if you've met your legal requirement to get rid of the water in your area? Right. Peaceful coexistence,
I think one
right?
thing you could argue is that they haven't met the intent of the design, and that they've raised these inlet boxes. I would say several of them. I don't know that you could say all of them, but these inlet boxes on their property have been raised to where the overland flow from this property can't get to those. And so you could argue that, look, the intent of the design was that flow from east to west be maintained. So I do think you could have some argument with the HOA. Look, and that's kind of how we've argued with Oakwood. Look, this system really isn't operating the way that it ought to.
For as far as clean handoff goes, because what I perceive is that if the city made a determination that that isn't meeting its intent, we don't have an enforcement. That's still between private property owners, I'm thinking.
Right, because they altered something after the fact. So that was also, in my mind, we regulate the construction of a facility and then someone after the fact changed that, and it's the homeowner.
I do want to point out the fact, though, that right here, since they've changed it, this is actually lower than his property. On the east side of the fence, this catch basin would catch every bit of water. If he breached that berm, this catch basin is actually lower. The elevation's lower by 2 inches on this side than it is on that side. This side may not be, but this one is 2 inches lower. We shot it here, we shot it here.
So what I'm trying to get to is where you're saying, what are the solutions? What can we accomplish? We can't do an enforcement.
Go ahead.
We can potentially provide free consulting services to give somebody, indemnifying the city towards a position in a potential lawsuit between 2 private property owners. I'm not sure how, I mean, I like the fact that we're trying to come up with ideas to help out. I don't see a clean path for how the city participates effectively to help out the property owners in either case.
Can I make one statement?
Sure.
Yeah, we're all familiar with the boundary right away. That's perfect. Perfect is up in, perfect example of what's going on. Go through and make the boundary right away, which used to run the train to Ogden. Everything east of that was wetlands. Hawks filled it in, solid walkway. Now, on Farmington's side, you guys talk about my house and that. I'm not worried. Boundary right away is a lot higher up than my property. The problem we got is when you build a subdivision and you raise it to the 100-year floodplain that they require, it raises the 100-year floodplain another 4 feet, especially on these low areas like we're talking. I don't have a problem with when it rains, I get water in my pasture. I have a problem with all summer, as you got in the pictures, I've dated them, tried to, I have them clear back to 2016 if you want more, let me know. The watering of that last house that Randy says it's 2 inches, it's not. The water hits the vinyl fence, runs down on my property. I have a video that I'll get put on a CD or something and give to the mayor, drop it off to you guys. You can watch it dripping and running on my property. But that's all I can say.
I'd like to make a comment. I think that's a great point he makes, but that's something, the low point is right here. If people are spraying water here, there's a possibility you might get some seeping, but if they put their irrigation in properly and irrigate away from the fence instead of into the fence, then the water wouldn't be sprinkling. I mean, they could be shooting it over top of the fence too, as far as we're concerned. But that's not our responsibility to make sure that they irrigate properly.
One comment too, this is kind of just to address, we did require the developer to put in a larger pipe underneath UTA to get rid of that 100-year floodplain. So we let them fill, but we came in with the study that Lisa mentioned on the Lone Pine Creek. We upsized the culvert underneath frontage road I-15 UTA from a 24-inch to a 36-inch. And the developer had a large contribution, and so that alleviated the floodplain in this area. So these are kind of more localized flood. It's not coming from a stream channel, except for maybe that small culvert under.
Okay, the Hawks, for instance, the city put in over 100 feet of 3-foot cement ditch for free.
Hawks didn't pay for it. The city.
I can prove this. Over 100 feet.
Randy, can you address that?
So why didn't they just bring it all the way down when you guys let Rennie Holmes tie into it? You're saying our pipe's too small.
Well, I think that culvert underneath that driveway is a separate issue from what we're discussing tonight.
Rennie Holmes, if they didn't dump water into there, we wouldn't have flooding over our driveways. That's why mine's asphalt, because I can't afford to keep putting rock on it. Because it overfloods every time we get a rain.
But are you saying that water makes it over to this pond area that we're talking about?
It's a separate.
It's all on the road.
It's a separate drainage issue.
It's all covered by the trees there.
It doesn't go
Well, no, that's why when you said it was two issues, I wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that it is two issues.
It's two separate issues, yeah.
But they brought up that our pipes are too small, so they weren't too small until Rennie Homes on that whole hillside, all their runoff comes down that ditch.
But Rennie Homes is Farmington, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do drain into Lone Pine. I guess my point was is that we did require the developer to enlarge the infrastructure under frontage road, and then it was upsized underneath I-15, UP, UTA, and so there was quite a expensive improvement that was put in downstream.
How many homes back up to that road? 5. How many homes are in the subdivision? 29.
You know, actually, it's not the homes that are the biggest need for water. It's actually the canyon. The study that was done on the canyon, the Low Pine Canyon, is where most of the water comes from. The size of the pipe has to be enlarged for. Rainy Home is probably one of the smallest parts of that quantity. And a lot of it will come from the property east of it in this quadrant. Rainy may have 10, 15 homes. But it was really the storm water from the rains and the snow melt that created the size.
From your park?
What's that?
From your park?
From the park all the way up the canyon, up Lone Pine Creek. That's where most of the water comes from. So in 1983, these culverts weren't large enough and they flooded from that, and Rainy Home wasn't even there in 1983. So it really is a runoff problem from the canyon more than it is a localized. In fact, most of our storm drain systems that are on creeks are larger because of the runoff from snow melt or rains in the canyon.
1983, Lone Lane was one of the only passable roads east to west from Main Street to Front Road. Front Road was underwater.
Yes, but this property was underwater during that time too.
So,
Yeah, it was.
so
It
we've,
really was.
we've been very considerate. We've given this plenty of time tonight. I don't appreciate those comments, Mr. Evans. We're being civil, and I expect you to do the same. So we've been very considerate here tonight, and we've listened to this. There's possibility that your property is a low spot. That's where water flows to the low spot. I'm going to, when I read why we did this study, the city council requested that city staff address some Wood Parks matters that came up in a recent meeting with the city council. Mr. Evans made some assumption or accusations, and so the council requested this study to be done. They've come back with it. So I throw out to the city council, after hearing all this, what would you like to do with it since you requested the study to be made?
Well, I'll lead out on that because I was the one who said I wanted a staff report. Because we have heard about this issue for a couple of years. But my thoughts right now, and they're not fully formed, I'm still forming my ideas on this, is this really sounds like the city, although can be friendly and offer advice, but I don't see that the city can indemnify itself in terms of taking up the survey duties to prove party A, party B in this. And it sounds like it's really between two property owners. I don't know. Am I totally misreading that?
You're talking between the Evans here and Oakwood?
Well,
or who's ever watering in those subdivisions?
Right. It's the same thing as if I get a building. To me, I'm looking at it, and I'm probably simplifying it too much. It's the same thing as if I pull a building permit for a structure, and then I go make modifications to it, put a big TV antenna on it or something that blocks my neighbor's view or causes issues for my neighbor that was outside of the original specification. In this case, the landscaping, if the landscaping was changed that is creating issues, I don't know that we have an enforcement capability. I'm not sure how we can help other than say that there is an issue, but it is between two private parties.
And because we've asked the question, the enforcement with sprinklers is Weber Water? Right. Or like Randy said, he can issue a citation, but it's not the police issue, right?
Well, we don't make people against...
Randy, could you come up because we need to get it on audio.
We don't make sure that anyone has it spraying away from their fence. But in this situation, if they went to them and said, put your sprinkler heads at the fence and shoot it away so you're not spraying it into it, because you'd get more water if it's spraying onto the fence rather than away from it, that may be a solution that would help. because they could be spraying through it, around it, I don't know. But it's my feeling that they have the ability to solve allowing any water to go onto their property. The subdrain or the storm drain is deep enough that it'll collect all the water. They can slope to make sure it's done quite well. I know for certain this one's done well. This one's now has 18 inches of dirt on that side that won't let it go there, so they're not getting any water from that one. I would agree with them that these discharge and point right at the fence. That's not the city's fault. That person can tie their drains directly into the storm drain system. It's not our responsibility to make them go do that. In fact, EPA would want you to run it through the lawn and then get it into the storm drain system, not directly into the storm drain system.
So this individual on the end that we're being told is overwatering or causing issues with, right there, yeah. What's the maximum that Weber Water can do? They can turn them off? I mean, I'm not sure I understand.
They're having a hard time having you irrigate during the 8-hour days, during the middle of the day. They have a hard time turning off for that. They generally don't turn it off for that type of a thing.
So,
or you're putting it on somebody else's property.
So that's what I'm saying is that we talk about enforcement. Even if they were to call the Conservancy District,
they wouldn't turn it off.
They're not going to turn it off.
No.
So it's still two parties disputing damage being done.
Yes.
I don't hear a clean enforcement mechanism from either the district or from the city to help in this issue.
And it's two parties. It's not just because the subdivision's up higher and then that caused drainage to happen there because now Mr. Evans' property is lower than before the subdivision.
This at one time was higher than his property. Kevin and I said, you've got to lower it. So they came in and lowered it. And like I said, we shot the grade there, which was here and here, and this is 2 inches lower than that. Plus he's bermed this, so there's no water that can go over there because his berm won't allow it to go there now, and the water can't go here. Now, Bill's may be a different issue. I wouldn't mind going out there and shooting 2 or 3 of these and shooting that property. But I still think that this is lower, and I think this property is lower. I think the storm drain's low enough, but I think Bill's property will not flow well through here now. I think Kevin's exactly right. This may at one time have flowed from his home, but we have more impervious stuff up here too that's happening on all the properties.
So if you shoot those and the math says that A is lower than B, what does it change for the property owners? So let's say that those are in fact higher. I don't see that changes we can't do anything about that.
Yeah, the reality of it is they own this property. Would we have to get an injunction against them, and we could ask Lisa to make them change this so that they're not allowing the water to go on? That's part of the problem is, Kevin's exactly right. We can't go on their property and change it. We could enjoin them or do something like that, but we don't generally do those kind of things for people who have water that they're putting on other people's properties.
So I'm sitting here looking at the maps, and you're talking about the increased impervious. You're talking about the increased impervious surfaces.
Yes.
There's not that much impervious surface here.
There really is. You'd be amazed at how much water that puts off that roof right there and that new roof. That alone will put off quite a bit.
When you say new, post the development of this subdivision?
Within the last 2 or 3 years.
But it's
talking about the one east of this was just recently built. Within the last 4 years or so.
So you're saying that the problem potentially has been increased because there's no permeable surface for that to go?
Yeah, well, even him putting the
even
new
so,
surface
Steve,
here,
there's
that
not
road's
that much.
not natural.
I mean,
Anything
this is
that's
all
not
vacant.
vegetated will have heavier
That's all
runoff.
vacant.
It's more impervious. So
It's still not 10% of the property.
This is just
Well,
advice, but if I owned the property that D. Evans owned, or Bill, I would go to, I think, Lisa might shoot me on this, but I think Oakwood.
I think she's preparing to.
I think that Oakwood would extend this pipe to this property line. And I think that they could extend this pipe to this property line. This pipe I know is deeper than this pond. Then these property owners, again, if I own the property, I would say, hey, look, if you'll get it to the property line, I'll take it from my property to the low spot. I'll treat the water. I'll sign an agreement. that the water will be treated before it enters into your private system. Then you're only running, you know, you might be running 20 feet of pipe here. Oakwood would have to run, you know, that's probably 40 feet, and then at least it would be stubbed to Bill's property to where Bill could take it to the low spot, especially if you didn't want somebody else on your property. But that's really the simplest way that it ought to be solved and handled.
And Lisa, to keep him from getting shot over that, I would say I don't have an issue with them recommending to Oakwood, hey, here's a simple solution, but the city's obligation, we don't have an obligation here. We're going to make a suggestion, and two property owners need to work out their ultimate solution.
I agree.
So I'm fine with staff direction to make those suggestions to Oakwood, provide that to the property owners, so that what has been represented to Oakwood is also represented to the property owners who are affected, and then the city has to bow out.
Oakwood doesn't have control of the homeowners association now, so you'd have to.
Sorry, the governing body who owns the drainage and that, the party that's gonna get sued by party A would be the one who has to,
You
that
could
would
ask
provide that too.
Oakwood to do the work and pay the fee, but you could ask the homeowners association if they would allow it to be done, to make sure they're in harmony.
And I think, agreed, and our obligation is simply, we're gonna make a friendly suggestion.
Yeah.
We're not doing any engineering on that, and provide that information to both parties so they can come to a solution.
So who's passing the information on to the governing body?
We know who they are. We know who the HOA is, right? So I don't know. I'm looking right at you, Randy and Corey and Kevin, as a group.
We could deal with them with as we release the bond, tell them this is a solution.
I see this as no more complicated than you take a print, scratch the lines on this is where you could put it, and provide it to both parties.
I think that sounds great, because when we heard from Oakwood before, and from the homeowners down there, the general idea is everybody wants to get along well. It's just been kind of hard to find how to do that. So if a little piece of paper saying, hey, you can do this and you can do this, and it'll all solve and everybody can be friends and live peacefully, I think that's an excellent solution.
And Randy, will you need to do a couple of shootings there to make sure that
would work?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can
GPS.
certainly shoot it,
Please don't shoot
yeah,
anybody.
we can shoot it and see if it's low enough.
Okay.
I agree with Tim. I think both of them are low enough. To be as low as the property line, not low enough, you might be 6 inches or 12 inches below the ground here and here.
Okay, I just don't want to give them an idea that won't work, so if you just make sure it works before you give it to them.
Permission that they can enter their properties, that's another part of it. They'll allow them to get on it.
Well,
Just stub it to the property line, when it's there.
I don't want to incur that obligation to go shoot those, and I'll tell you why. Because no matter which way the math works out, you've become an expert witness for party A or party B in a lawsuit.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
All I'm saying is we are making a non-binding, non-engineering, here's some lines of where you could work on it, and leave it between those two parties. Because I don't want the city to obligate itself to either side of this argument. Dee, come on up to the mic so we can hear you.
Just look at picture 14. Randy just said that there was 6 inches?
No. Difference between, you mean?
The front yards and my property, 6 inches?
You're talking about, there's 2 inches difference. Your property is higher, 2 inches right there, than it is right here. That's 2 inches lower, at the low point where he has his catch basin.
So did you go out and shoot that property out there in the pond?
No, didn't shoot the pond. We shot right here on the fence line. Put the rod across the fence, saw what the fence was there, and then shot on this side of the fence.
Why thought I just heard you say the front grass where that car's parked in the road?
No, we have shot these, and these slope away from your property. None of the curbs and gutters slope that direction. We have inlets.
I heard you say 6 to 8 inches difference from my low spot to the.
No, well, this pond is lower here than it is over here, because the pond tells you that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the pond isn't over here, the pond is away from it 10,
Well, I'm just
15.
saying on picture 14, that road is 4 feet above my property line, right? My property?
This is higher than your property, absolutely. It's probably 3 feet, I don't know.
Okay, I was just saying, refer picture 14, those of you that got them, and tell me, you're welcome to come down later. I mean, I don't know.
But the pipes are deep enough to where you can
Yeah.
get into them.
Yeah, the pipes are definitely.
I didn't give the permit. I don't know.
Okay, council, you okay with what Councilman McEwen has mentioned?
I think that sounds good.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Well, and thanks everybody for being here.
And Kevin, if you could just get that off your plate as quick as possible so that it's in both parties' hands, or if you're giving it to Randy or to Corey.
He's already talked to him about it earlier, but
Okay, perfect, then we're good to go.
they know that that's.
Are we tabling item 8?
Well,
to another
I
meeting,
would
or-
suggest something even better than that, Mayor. I have been texting with Marcus to hold him off, and my most recent text was that I was going to recommend that we just delete this report. You have the 6-month report. Just delete him coming and giving you the report, because next meeting, he's going to give you the 7-month report.
Yep.
Let's just wait for the 7-month report.
Steve headed to retirement is much more flexible.
So are you okay with that?
Unless there's any questions on it, I mean, you can shoot them to me anytime.
Yeah.
I can answer them.
I mean, we don't have any significant issues to make you aware of there. Jake and I have both reviewed it page by page with the CPA. So I'd say we just wait for the 7-month report, which is coming on February 19th.
So is council okay with that?
Yes.
I'm okay with that.
All right.
Okay.
We don't need a motion or anything, then we can skip over that?
No.
Okay, so we're
There's a
down.
chance we'd get a 5-minute break.
You bet. You bet. 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Maybe 10.
Yeah.